At least everybody's trying to figure out what the noise is, so it works. Morning, everybody. It's a nice fall day out, and Royals are on tonight, and district football, and it's, you know, what else could be better? Other than, well, hopefully everybody wins tonight. At least half of you will. And then hopefully the Royals win. Well, we want to welcome you to the Curriculum Leaders Conference. We would like to start out with the president of the Kansas Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development, Christy Meyer from Goddard, and she was just going to welcome you real quick.
Good morning. Got to visit with a lot of you this morning about accreditation, so I saw some of your faces. So I want to first just start by thanking you. I know you don't get thanked enough, and your jobs are incredibly difficult, and we appreciate all that you do and all the many different aspects to your job that you're always trying to balance in an ever-changing world. And so we talked a lot about stress this morning, and I know that you often are stressed, and so we just want you to know that we appreciate what you do. And with that being said, our organization is specifically organized. One of the main focuses is to support you and to help you. And I know most of you in this room are a member of KSDE, have been for many years. But for those of you that are new, if you haven't joined, we'd love to have you in our organization so that you're a part of our community. It's a small $35 fee. It's not as big as some of the other organizations. We have newsletters. We try to put on workshops. We listen to the voice of Kansas, what you guys need, and try to put what we call just-in-time workshops on, addressing your needs. We've done breakdown of the new standards when they came out. We recently did a digital leadership conference, so you would get discounts to those and resources that go along with that. We also do awards, and then our most recent thing that we really would like for someone to make sure that they apply for, we have a new $2,000 professional learning scholarship we're going to give away each year. And so I have some of those scholarship forms with me, as well as the membership forms. If anyone wants to see me, it's an opportunity for you to go to a conference, maybe the National ASCD conference, which is fabulous. So please apply for that. If you're a member, and if you're not a member, please sign up with me, and we would love to have you as part of our organization. Oh yes, this is a perfect time, speaking of members, of our group here. Do we have new curriculum directors, new people in our group today that haven't been a part of our meetings?
Okay, if you have your hand up, that means we're going to ask you to stand up and introduce yourself with your teacher voice and where you're from. So everybody stand up if you're new, and then after you introduce yourself, then you can sit down. Oh, bless you. You got to deal with Dr. Peters? Okay.
I'm
Coffeeville. Great.
Annie.
More than great. We'll get to that later.
Annie Dietrich, I'm from the Stevens School District. Rachel Oliver,
Blue Valley.
Stacy Yurkovich with DeSoto School District. Jennifer Reed, Hazel School. Carmen Flax with Salina.
Any other ones? How many feel like it's your first year? All right. Well, thank you, Christy. Obviously, I can't make fun of Coffeeville anymore. Not that I ever did, but Dr. Randy Watson, our commissioner, hails from the great metropolis of Coffeeville, and so that's something I have to keep in mind now, that I can't say anything about Coffeeville, other than they're great. They have always been. For those of you new, I'm Brad Newenswonder. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Learning Services. Kind of the way these curriculum leader meetings are orchestrated is, we send out, this is your meeting. If you go back, how many people in here were here for the very first curriculum leaders meeting? Okay, we got a few in here. From my understanding back then, you met all over the state But there was always this, could we get people from the State Department to come and give us updates? So then they decided to start having them in Topeka. So it's your meeting, you tell us what you want updates on, and then we come in and give you updates. So a couple things that I wanted to share with you. First of all, the people out there that are watching this won't hear this because we can't get hardwired in, but we will. Nick is videoing it, so we'll get it posted. So if you know someone back home, email them, let them know that. They're not going to be able to see it live streamed, but we will, as soon as we can, get it posted, and they can, so we just bought them a couple hours of their time today. A couple things I wanted to share with you. There's your introduction. All right, you did a great job. We started Learning Services a luncheon hot topic. Anybody know what it was called last week? Yeah, I had a lot of people request, can we just call it luncheon? We used to call it brown bag hot topics back before I was at the agency. Anyway, we're going to turn over a new leaf and call it luncheon hot topic. So it's every first and third Wednesday of the month. We started it last Wednesday, 12 to 1. All you have to do is log on to YouTube and search KSDE, and it should pop up. We'll send agendas out in advance to let you know what the topics are. Last Wednesdays, you can go to my webpage. Most of you don't know how to get there because I have very few hits on it. But on my webpage, we will post the presentations and a copy of the video so you can use it at any time with your staff if so desired. The first thing we're going to be doing next Wednesday is we're going to be walking you through Learning Services website and show you where most of the pertinent information is. There's so much stuff that we have that a lot of people, one, don't even know we have it, or two, can't find it. For example, I'll start out with my webpage and show you all of my PowerPoints that I do when I'm out across the state. I post them on the webpage. Teresa posts them on the webpage for me, and they're there for you to borrow, steal, use, whatever. That's just examples of, I'll show you what's on mine, then early childhood, teacher licensure, standards. They'll walk through and show you where you can find assessment materials and all that, because I think a lot of people, one, don't know what we have, and two, wouldn't know how to find it if they knew it. So that'll be the first part of next Wednesdays. What I wanted to do, sometimes you got to hear it 5 or 6 times. I want to have a discussion about, this was on last Wednesdays. How many of you logged in last Wednesday to, okay. So this is a refresher for you, but the others, what can you be doing right now with the accreditation system? First of all, and again, we will show you again next Wednesday where you find all this information, but on our accreditation website, down here, you can go to the proposed model, and there's a ton of resources, and this is actually that page where you can find rubrics, just all kinds of stuff. We'll walk through it. But I just wanted to walk through. Is that my hearing aid or? Oh, I don't have hearing aids. My wife, how many people have seen me on a hearing aid commercial? Yeah, isn't that weird? Did you notice that the lady testing my hearing is my wife? Yeah, people are like, man, I saw your wife on TV. Or someone else will say, I didn't know you wore a hearing aid. conned me into being on a hearing aid commercial because that's what she does for a living, and people are always looking at my ears going, I didn't know you wore that. Those are good ones. So anyway, I was a prop. But here's what you need to be doing this year, or what we're recommending that you would do this year. Familiarize your staff with the state board's definition of college and career ready. They adopted this 2 years ago, but when you're looking at it, there's really you'll see this ACTE. And what the board, and Randy's going to visit about you here in a minute, what the board is trying to do, we have 5 R's, 4 of them are not measures. The relationships, the relevance, the rigor, the responsive culture. Those are rubrics that guide your conversation around parent engagement, quality instruction. And the rubrics are just there to have the conversations, do we do these types of things? But the results are, and I don't want to speak too much about Randy's, are how do we know then that they're there? Are they academically prepared? They have the cognitive abilities, those technical skills, employability skills. So familiarize yourself with the state board's definition about different types of measures, or how do we know that our kids are actually going to be prepared for success after high school. So go through that and kind of talk about it's different than, this is the hardest thing when I go out to school districts, especially at the beginning of the school year. I was at several districts during their professional development days. Some of them actually do invite me. And just hearing their conversation, it's almost like they're uncomfortable having conversations about something other than math and reading scores, and trying to dig into the assessment results and all that, and they're really saying, well, you know, what do you mean by employability skills? So get them familiar with that. As an example, get them looking at the Rose standards. It's been out there for a while, but people aren't having a lot of conversations. Here's a link to the Kansas Association of School Boards, has some really good documents and stuff about the Rose standards. And we kind of, one of those, we did a thing where how the Rose standards, and it's on our website, align to the college and career ready definition, how it aligns to MTSS. So start having those documents out there. Look at KSB, they've done a lot of that. But when you look at the 7 Rose standards, only 2 of them talk about that kids are academically prepared. Or they call it vocational, but that was at a time, we now call it technical. But 5 of the Rose standards talk about things other than just academic readiness. So let them start getting familiar with that. Why is that important? Because the legislature put the 7 Rose standards in legislation that said those are the goals they want you to meet. To me, that was a home run for education in Kansas, because it's now in statute that they want you to prepare kids more than just academically. So get familiar with those and look at some of the documents, crosswalk that we've put together, of how the Rose standards align to not only the rubrics in the new accreditation model, but the college career ready definition, to MTSS. It's perfectly aligned. Get them familiar with the KISA framework. You've seen this out there. And again, 4 of the R's have rubrics. I was with the district earlier this year that they're sitting down and they're picking out which one they want to have conversations, and they have a group of staff sitting around saying, where are we at with our instruction, student engagement, our district culture and climate. And they'll be all over the board. Because starting out, everybody thinks they do a great job of communicating with parents. Until they look at the rubrics and say, well, we do some of these things. And the rubrics are not about requiring you to do every bulleted item. It's just like when you evaluate a teacher. You're trying to find out, does that teacher look more like this or this? Because there are certain things, and those are the things that you can be doing with your staff is pick one, walk through and say, you know what, we think we do a really good job in some of these areas, but obviously there's a few places where we think that we could focus on. Because eventually, after you go through all of those, you're going to select a couple that you want to work on. And what would you implement and put forward over the next few years? Right now, the board, state board, is working on the results are. How do we then want to measure whether we're successful? And I'll let Randy talk about that. Again, review the 4 rubrics, and this with calibration or IRA, inter-rater, what is it? Agreement, there it is. Too many acronyms. Basically, that's all that's saying is, I've got 6 elementary schools. Do we all have pretty much agreement in how we are interpreting these rubrics? Because we don't want 2 buildings say, yeah, we're modeling, we're blowing it, and then 3, and actually they may be doing better. So is there agreement? And then how do the rubrics align to the definition of college career ready? The ROSE capacities, again, we've got documents out on there that do those crosswalks, and just right now get staff familiar. And you know what? The places I've been, they're uncomfortable. Because most of the professional development over the last several years, in a lot of cases, has been about preparing to hit a AYP target. And that's not everywhere, but they're like, well, wait a minute. I really kind of enjoy having these conversations, but it's kind of uncomfortable for some of them because that's not what professional development in a lot of places, or in some places, has been about. Now, I was just talking to some people earlier. That's what they have been doing the last 2 years. So what we're trying to do is say, as we finally get into a new model, what are things that you can be doing today? And then look at, for those of you that do have strategic plans or goals already, most of those are going to align to those rubrics. So start making some connections. Now, timeline-wise, let me make sure I didn't have another. Timeline-wise, a year ago at this time, we were hoping to go to the board by this December for them to start taking actions on what the Assessment Advisory Council has been recommending up to this point. Well, traditionally, every 2 years, due to board elections, the board has their retreat in February. Well, when Randy was hired, it was decided before the board has a retreat about selecting their results are, why don't we go across the state and find out first what Kansans want? And Randy's going to share with you some of that. Many of you have seen it. So the board held their retreat off, and they're actually been doing it this fall. So instead of them taking action, they'll take action later once they define their new vision and how we want to measure success. So I really look at, that's why we're saying, here's things you can be doing now in this year. Next year will most likely almost be what we would call a 0 year. Because what Kansans, as we've been going through this, we have to get away from the old QPA that was an annual event. Every year, based on your state assessment results, regardless of whether you checked all 11 assurances, we'd look at your assessment results and there'd be a new group that was on improvement, or a new group, it was an annual event. We're moving back to, no, in the first year, you'll do a needs analysis. But many of you will go into that first year, or what we may call a 0 year, and you may say, you know what, 3 years ago, we did a full-blown needs assessment of our district, and we set some goals, and you may find out next year, you know what, we're already in year 3. Because you're all at different places right now. I had a superintendent, he's not a new superintendent, a veteran superintendent, but new at a school district. He called me in August and said, Brad, I need some help. Nobody in this district has ever heard of the 5 R's. Well, guess where you think they're going to be? Probably in year 1, doing so that first, I anticipate next year, all of you, and we'll start rolling out, we'll unplug the old QPA report, plug in the new one that's being designed, and it's basically an electronic 3-ring binder, so you don't have to collect paper copies. It's all right there. You already have a lot of the stuff you already need. You're going to find out where are we in the process. We'll have some districts. I was talking to a superintendent. They're an advanced ed district. They're finalizing their 5-year cycle. And probably next year, they'll be back, they're going to be starting over at year 1. And they'll click on there, we're in year 1, we're doing a needs analysis, and they're going to click on it, and they're going to say, and we're using advanced ed. Perfect. Well, I'm a KLN district. Great, you already have. So, yes. It'll be designed on there. So let me give you an example. If you're not an advanced ed district, or you're not a KLN district, because we provide you the technical assistance and the team and do that, you can then say, all right, I want to use the KISA model that has the rubrics already laid out in each one of these, and it will walk you through the steps. First thing, building levels, go through rubrics. Select them, go through and find out where do we believe so it'll walk you through that if you have not already done so. But again, some districts have already done those. They already have evidence and everything, and they may find out that, they've already developed an action plan and goals, and so now they're in the implementation phase. So we'll have districts all over the place as far as what year that they find. Well, it's part of it. It'll walk you through for like the relationships are. How do you know that if you marked yourself modeling and all those, that means you have done surveys and you've done those. But if you're like, geez, we've totally ignored our community and our parents, well, guess what? You're going to select maybe some of your goals. We need to do some surveying of our community and parents, and guess what? 2 years ago, we contracted and we had some surveys, quality ones designed, free to you. If you want to survey students, parents, or staff, we've got some available free to you that were a nationally recognized company, validated. Some of you were involved in that. So that's part of the accreditation needs to be more about a process than an event. And for the last decade, it's been about an event. even though you may have had a school improvement plan, so you checked that one, you had all of these things and you checked it, it really came down to, did you hit the target? So then when we got closer to 100%, people started, okay, all right, we got to get it. And Kansan said, we got to be back more into balance. So now I'm getting into Randy's stuff again. So if you have questions, again, the full-blown presentation is on my webpage from the last lunchtime hot topic with the video of it, where you can hear the audio and everything. But if you have questions, Bill, Kelly, Scott, me, call. Questions for me. What do I have, 5 minutes? Because I'd be glad to give you 5 of my minutes, but right now, again, next Wednesday, we're going to show you where you can find all types of resources that you didn't know were out there on all types of things. But just around accreditation, have staff start having conversations, and I know it's going on all over the state, because every time I hear from people said, that was some of the most valuable conversations that we've had. Talking about quality instruction, school culture and climate. How do we allocate resources? How do we use our data, So, no questions? It's hard when I got this guy after me, because that's really, I'm the warm-up guy, and no one likes the well. Well, okay. By the way, there is an event coming up in a little more than a week, and I know Randy's going to talk about it, but the annual conference we now have, is that a new record?
How many are coming? October 27th.
Okay. Well, you're one of 1,094 Kansans that have already registered, so it's going to be great.
We have a few good tickets left. I passed mine out. You got them in your pocket?
Yeah. Good morning. How are you? I've been waiting to go after Brad my whole life. How many of you came either to one of our listening, visiting tours, or what we call the reunion tours? All right. So he slammed me over this CB handle thing, right? And I've got some dirt. I've got some really good dirt that I've been waiting to spring on him. But I'm not sure it's to the level that I want, which is, like World Series, Royals, right? So if you got some things you want to share with me, we'll meet privately, because I'm compiling a list. And when I unleash my response to him trashing me over that CB handle on those...
How many people in here raise your hand if you don't know what his CB handle was?
And there's be a good reason not to start that today, right? I don't have a slide for it, because I'm doing the presentation today. So, thanks for coming. I was one of the ones to raise my hand being at the first meeting, the curriculum director. So this is like homecoming. I'm glad to be here. I want to go over with you a little bit about the data that we collected. And you can get that on my website. It's called Reunion Tour, where you can also get what my CB handle is, I think, if you download that. But I'm going to spend more time on what the board has done with those. And it's not complete, but where we're headed, and then I want to field questions as you have them. So Brad and I went out on what we call the reunion tour to 10 different sites, and I actually went to an 11th site down in Labette County at Altamont High School in the evening. So we kind of toured over the state to show these results. And as you know, we asked 3 simple questions on the original tour. We really wanted to get from you and from every community, if we're going to, as we transition from ESEA and other systems, what do we want in a new system? So I want to ask this. How many of you taught or were a principal or curriculum director prior to 2000? All right. Do you know what percent of your staff, your teaching staff, taught prior to 2000? Yeah, statewide it's somewhere around 40% to 50%. So it may not be true for you. I bring that up for this reason. People, when we're done with this, people will say, well, how do we change this? Penny or someone else is going to push me on that. We've got a culture shift that we've got to shift back to because we've been in a high-stakes testing environment. And many of our staff members only know that. They went to college, were trained in that. They only know that. So it won't happen overnight. This is a process that we're going to have to start. So we simply ask 3 questions. What are the skills characteristics of a successful 24-year-old in Kansas? And then, after we have those, then what's our role as K-12 leaders in developing that person, and what's higher ed's role in developing that person? Then we did some things with business. So you've seen this data if you've been out on the tour. I'll just point out that when we asked those, the vast majority of responses we got were non-academic skills. And I'll phrase this in this way. Kansans told us this, and I'm summarizing, over 2,000 responses that we received either in person or online. We put too much into the standardized test basket at the exclusion of other things, and that those need to be balanced better. And so we're working hard as a state agency, as a state board, to rebalance those. However, when you've been in a system for a while, it doesn't change overnight, even though you'd like for it to. So we're going to talk about that as we go forward. After we were done with the first 20, Brad and I looked at the results, and we had only, I think, about 0.3% of the people that attended identified themselves in the business community. So we wanted to make sure that if we were going to go forward, we had a strong business voice. So Brad and I looked at the map. We chose 7 sites. 6 of those were different cities than where we went out previously. We went to Wichita both times. And we went to 7 different cities, and we merged those with the Chamber of Commerce's in those cities. And we asked the same questions. The second one was a little bit different. What's K-12's role in working with business to achieve that? And you know the results. I really thought that what I would hear over and over and over again from business was if they could count back change, or if they didn't know how to use a tape measure. And we heard a little bit about that, but they, even more so than our first community groups, which were heavily attended by educators, said, we're not getting kids that have these employability, these non-academic, these 21st century, and Brad likes to call them success skills. That's a good title. But I think all of these academic are success skills too, so we're kind of wrestling with that. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this, which was what's our role in developing that person? Because I thought maybe all of you and others would say some of this are the parents' role. Some of this are, some other people. So the left side of this, which is really red, but it looks black, 37%, skill training, breaks down this way. Skill training that we can do easily today, I say easily, nothing's easy in change, but instrumental training, which is simply this. You have to be able to apply what you know to real world situations. And I'll break that down a little bit, but for the most part, no matter how well we design any state assessment or any written assessment, we're going to get very little into this area. We can get into critical thinking, we can get into, some analysis, but they're saying actually put those skills to work in a real environment. And an assessment's not a real environment. It's a simulated environment. So we're working to do some of that, but any assessment's going to be difficult. Non-academic, we talked about. Academic skills are important. I joked. How many of you from Western Kansas today? Okay, so you appreciate this. So I was bunking on some of the tour in McPherson because it was a shorter trip. And I left McPherson one morning on my way to Ellis, Kansas. All right? And I was talking to an educator in Kansas. I won't even disclose the gender, much less the name. But I said, I'm on my way to Ellis, Kansas. And it was, are you going through Wichita on the way? Now, that's why academic skills are important, okay? Geography would not have you leaving McPherson going to Ellis via Wichita unless something I don't know about geography. Don, we've got a little work to do on those standards. Critical thinking, we think we can get deeper into that with our new assessment, into the critical thinking and really analyzing. And as a history major, I think, if we did that really well, that could be everything in the social sciences. So as I said, bring up these 13%. The people said internships, work studies, apprenticeship, job shadowing, job exposure, service or volunteer experiences. Jay and I just had dinner the other night with a lovely young lady, a student here in Kansas, and she said one of the things that she got interested in at age 10 was helping kids in poverty. And she was invited to actually give a speech on volunteerism in a stadium, 20,000 people. And I thought that was pretty cool. So how do we apply these skills and go forward? All right, the other half of this, or the 63%, I think are where Kansans were starting to tell us we are going to have to look at schooling different. And so I think the left part is hard, but it's pretty doable with some easy schedule changes and thoughts about standards and assessment. Now we're going to get into things I think that are more difficult and what the state board's wrestling with. So these are from greatest response here to least response. And the first is we have to look at school climate. We have to raise expectations for all kids. And I'm going to paraphrase, there was a lot of school climate things all over the place. But here's something that you have to do starting, not tomorrow, because you'll be resting from cheering on the Royals. All right? But Monday. For too long, when the senior class gets ready for their senior awards, which we'll do for the class of 16 here in a few months, we have mom and dad and photo ops, and someone's going to be valedictorian in all of our schools. Someone's, if we have some time. And we're going to pull that person up, and they'll be from Goddard High School, and mom and dad are excited, and they have a 4.0 or 4.33 if it's a weighted scale. They've taken these hard classes, and they're probably going to say something like, and next year, I plan to go to Wichita State and major in engineering. That's, or I'm going to go to KU and major in pre-pharmacy. All right, you get the gist of that. And somewhere, we've got some kid going to Washburn Tech on a full ride to be a welder that we don't put at the same level. We have to start treating kids going on anywhere post-secondary on an equal playing field. All right? We need plumbers, electricians, physical therapy assistants. You go on, and you know this, that sometimes they make more money than the four-year degree people. Not that money's everything, but we've got to treat them equally. And we can all do that. That's a culture thing that we can just shift. So mom and dad get to come up for the kid that's going to the North Central Kansas school to be a Mason and has full scholarship or partial scholarship. We need to be honoring those kids the same way. Career planning, have to do better. You said Where does it start? Unclear. Some of you said high school, some of you said middle school, some of you said elementary, but it was all over the place, but we got to do it. All right? Family engagement. Cindy and I were talking earlier, as Brad went through the accreditation rubric, it's heavy on engaging families. And people are saying we've got to engage them differently than just, we're having a parent-teacher conference in 2 weeks. Come on down, and then complain that 40% of the parents didn't show up. Right? And then complain that the 40% that we really wanted to see were the ones that didn't show up. And so if you're like me, when I used to be superintendent, we'd complain about that, get the administrative team together, we'd discuss it, and then you know what we would do the next year? The same thing. No, not exactly. We would either change the cookies or the time, well, we don't need to go to 9 o'clock, let's only go to 7. But by and large, it was the same format. And then we'd complain again. Community collaboration. One of the challenges that we're going to get into, think about this. If you're in Wichita, you have a lot of opportunities for community and business collaboration, right? But you have a lot of students to fill those. If you're setting, in Stockton, you have more limited opportunities, but you have fewer students. So we all have challenges in this arena. Sometimes it's we don't have enough businesses and community to operate on. Some of it is we have plenty, but our kids are going to overwhelm the system because we have so many kids. So we're going to have to think about that as a system, how we do that. Individualized instruction. Darla, every time I pick up an article on individualized instruction, it's putting some kid in front of a computer. I think that's what you read the same thing? Individualized instruction, and it'll be a flipped classroom, you do the computer, or it'll be a blended learning, but that's how we, and I'm an old guy. I remember, George, when learning labs, we were going to send every kid in the 80s to a CCC or Jostens Learning Lab for 30 minutes, and we would never have to worry about them again. I don't know. We're still worrying about them, so I don't think individualized instruction means every kid just sitting in front of a computer, and I don't mean to say that technology doesn't play a huge role in this, okay? It does. Real-world instruction, we talked about that, project-based learning. By the way, many of you have some project-based learning. The ones in Kansas that are most visible, I think, would be like the CAPS program at Blue Valley, Erie High School, Walden School down in Newton. All of those programs, I'll put it this way. We have a majority, not a minority, a majority of kids and families that want what we have right now. They don't want this. They want what we have right now. And yet, Kansas is saying maybe we ought to look at this a little bit more. So think about that as it relates to how we work with our community. Early childhood, come back to that. And then some other things that were cited but less, extracurricular activities, college collaboration. How about if we made leaving high school and going on anywhere in Kansas, post-secondary level, as easy a transition as it is from 8th grade to 9th grade? Those of you who have kids know we have 19 community colleges. I don't know how many private and public 4-year, technical schools. Everyone's got a different application process, right? Got different scholarship requirements. And you know how hard it is to transition kids from 8th to 9th grade, and oftentimes we have 9th grade academies, right, to help that transition, but it's still an easier transition than it is for to college. So here are some take-home things that the researchers found. We may have to redesign the curriculum. Think about this. If project-based learning is even in our conversation, or blended learning, or we do something different, and you couple that with teacher shortage, which we're facing nationwide, then the way in which we license teachers would have to look somewhat different. It just would. I'm not advocating that. We have to have a discussion. You're the experts. We're going to have deep discussions about doing that. New roles for school counselors and social workers, or, Brad and I like to say, maybe we need to hire some, because we cut them, along with some others. But they're saying, get them away from administrative tasks and working with kids. So we have to think about that, because all of you there, you know, in your administration functions say, yeah, well, that's easy, but who's going to do those other things? And we don't have any money. And instrumental skills we talked about need to be done. How do we measure social emotional, non-cognitive measures? You'll see what you said about that. And project task performance, you said, are as important measures as traditional assessments and post-high school measures. Does a kid have a credential? Are they employed? Are they going on to post-secondary? Is very important. So we went out and we asked all of you, you get to vote on the board's vision if you came to one of the reunion tours. And you had two choices. This one, Kansas leads the world in student success. And if you want to know the definition of student success, it's all of those skills into one. We're moving away from using the word student achievement as the outcome. And the reason is I think others think, the word student achievement has a connotation of a test score attached to it, that you measure it by a test score. Student success is measured by a test score and other things. And here's what Kansas said we should have as our vision. Kansas leads the world in the success of each student. 81% of the responses were there. And the board adopted that as the vision. That will not be accomplished tomorrow, because we don't lead the world right now, all right? But that's where we're headed. There's a lot of work to be done, but that's where we're headed. So here's what the board is wrestling with, and then I want to answer some questions. Right now, if you go to your report card in any of your districts, what jumps out first? What's the first thing? Some of you don't know that you have a report card. What do you see on your report card? Go to Haven High School, and up front pops state assessment results. Okay? And at some point, as you know, in the history of the last 10 years, 12 years, we would release the data, release it to the parents, and then release all the individual school data across the state. And from time to time, the Wichita Eagle would do what with that data? Rank order your schools, right? And you're setting at El Saline High School, and the Salina Journal does that. It's not too hard to know who the fourth grade teachers are, right? And so we drove heavy proficiency towards state assessment, and we got really good. You did a really good job. But what if our outcomes were these? And these are what the state board right now, at a retreat this week, are saying that they're leaning toward. We're still a work in progress. High school graduation rate. We've got to get kids to graduate high school. Kids that do not graduate high school in Kansas have less than a 10% chance of ever reaching the middle class. Think about that. You like those odds? I don't like those odds. It's not impossible. So 85% is the state average, by the way. You should know what your high school graduation rate. By the way, kids in high school drop out. Do you know why they don't drop out in fourth grade? Yeah, one, you can't drop out when you're in fourth grade, but they really do, right? You know it. Go ask your fifth grade teachers who's going to really struggle as they get on. They're already showing those signs of not being interested in school. So high school gets to measure it, but this is why we're talking about district accreditation. How about this? Post-secondary completion or persistence. Here's what the board said. They said, we wanted to know how many of your graduates are going on to post-secondary. By the way, they're not asking you to send every kid you have to KU or a four-year institution. Not at all. Military, 2-year, 4-year. How many of your graduates are going on? Now, think about this. So, Cindy, at Bueller High School, think about this. If, and I'm making this up, if our graduation rate at Bueller High School is 90%, and our post-secondary going or completion of certificate is 80%, what percent of the freshmen that we measured at graduation really have any kind of post-secondary when they're done? I asked you because you're a math person, you know. Don and I would have been going, I don't know, where it is. We need 71% of the jobs in Kansas are going to require something with a post-secondary level. To get there, in general numbers, you need a 90% high school graduation rate and 80% completion of post-secondary. All right? That'd get you pretty close in the ballpark. So, got to balance those. Remedial rate when they get to post-secondary. So at Harrington High School, we're going to look at those kids that went on, how many of them needed to take remedial English and remedial math. Most of those are in the remedial math area, college algebra. Yes. That came up in our conversations across the state. Some people said, why don't we pass a law saying it should be 18? So that could be there. Now that could get more kids to graduate, but they'd still, you know what they're going to be for you, because they're not wanting to be there. When I was at Ellis, I was talking to a young man who taught a class that were for kids that were non-IEP kids that were not being successful in high school. And he had about 10% of the Ellis High School population. And he says, every day they tell me, I hate school. When can I drop out, or when can I just get through school and graduate because I hate school? So we have to balance that. But I think it has been brought up. Should we do that? So remedial rate. It's about 30% statewide, the remedial coursework when they arrive somewhere. Kindergarten readiness. Well, this is a huge discussion, wasn't it, Brad? Because the topic was pre-K. All right? The topic was having more 3- and 4-year-olds in validated, purposeful pre-K environments. But then when the board talked about, well, how do you measure that? Because there's some really good privates, and there's some really good, and we don't have any way to collect data on that. They said, here's what we can tell, right? And then some people said, well, some parents bring kids, do that at home, which is fine, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So they said, what if we took a kindergarten readiness snapshot the first week everyone enters kindergarten, and Angie, if in McPherson, half of the kids show that they're not ready, that starts to give us some indication of what we have to do in our community to get them ready. Does that make sense? Versus counting whether they're in a pre-K or not. Maybe they're all in pre-K and we need to raise, what we're doing in pre-K. So kindergarten readiness, board's looking at an individual plan of study focused on the career interest of a child. Social emotional growth and measures done locally and then reported through the accreditation model. State didn't want to design a new assessment to give you, but said it's important. There are many products that do that at fairly low cost. Some of those are free. Gallup has some for free, but said we're going to have to take a look at that and help grow that. So I'm going to stop right there because that's where the board is, and I've got about 5 minutes. And notice what's not on there. There's no standardized test on there at all. Now they said that's important, but they're leaning toward letting you use that as an indicator that kids are on the track to get to here. Does that make sense? So the wrestle was, what does the state want as the outcome? Because when we had proficiency on a state exam, what did we all do? We knocked it out of the park on proficiency on state exam. So we're trying to figure out if student success is our measure, is our outcome, what are the measures that drive that at the state level, and what would get in the way of that? So, standardized test scores, attendance. There's a whole host of things that can be done locally, put into the accreditation model, and we'll talk about it at the state level, but not spend 2 or 3 months looking at it, more looking at this. So, feedback. Yes?
I guess I'd say the same thing with age on the other end. Right now, I'm 7 years old is when you're supposed to come to school in the state of Kansas.
And is that a problem in most places? Are parents holding their kids out of school till 7? Because I've never been anywhere that I experienced that. They couldn't wait to let us have them. I mean, in many cases. Okay.
Like attendance,
Oh, yeah.
something with that, they kind of lack that when you're talking about a preschool or kindergarten student, because they don't really even have to be there.
Right. Yeah, they don't have to be there, but they're probably coming. We have to tell parents, because you know this, if a kid's absent, for the most part, or certainly tardy in elementary, whose fault is it? Yeah, it's a parent. I mean, for the most part. There may be the kid's running away or something, but for the most part, it's a parent. But that trend, when they hit middle school, becomes the kid doing it, because it's sending a message that school's not important. And what employers beat us up on, they said, when we say 8 o'clock, work starts, we don't mean 8:10. We don't mean 8:20, we mean 8 o'clock. So we've got to help change culture that says we're going to have to have good attendance so that it's a workplace skill. It's a workplace employability skill.
The age 7 is if the state law changes, that's the whole start of talking about that importance with preschool and kindergarten.
Okay. So you'd like for us to mandate that through state law? Yes.
Kind of the same principle that we talk about truancy, things like this. If you've dealt with a student who's been truant, there's a lot of outside factors, but you also deal with why a fourth grader would drop out of school. Is there any talk about social service and a revamping of a system or so on to help out? Not only we see what we can do with the 63% from the school side, but what about the outside factors? Is there any talk about what that looks like when you're talking about communities and trying to get parent involvement?
Not specifically, but as we went through, this was a common theme. And business really pointed this out. Said, common theme was, this is not a school-only solution problem. That's why you'll see this. This is a student, school, community, business community problem solution. And we heard over and over from business, we want to partner with you to try to solve this. And we heard over and over, we've got to have better community collaboration in order to make this happen. Let's talk about the pre-K side. You guys all know this on the pre-K side. We have special education pre-K, right? We have 4-year-old at-risk pre-K. We have Head Start and early Head Start pre-K. We have parents as teachers. We have faith-based pre-K. We have private, for-profit pre-K. We have all of those in that system, and yet very seldom in any of our communities where we have all those do they coordinate. There are some exceptions to that, but they don't. So the answer is, in a global scale, yeah, we've got to do that. This is not the third grade teacher can solve this alone or the principal can solve this alone. This is how as communities are we going to do that. And as an example of that pre-K, collaborations in Coffeyville. And it's extremely hard, isn't it? It's extremely hard, but they're pulling it off, and they're going to have universal pre-K by using those sources. So that's what we're going to have to start doing on multiple levels. But great question and comment. What else? Yeah. We had about 100 students attend. Now, some of those were college, some of those were high school, but we did have about 100 responses on the original, and we had, I don't know what our numbers were, we didn't look at the breakout on the reunion, but but we had quite a few, especially in southeast Kansas and southwest Kansas, attend there. But yeah, I was just talking to Kevin Case at Inman. He said, you know, what's really instructive, you know, he said in our little school is just go through, and I think he used the class of 14, looking back. He started there, and he just listed every kid in that class that started. And then he said, you know, we figured out 20% of our kids either didn't graduate or weren't being successful upon graduation. And of course, we just said, well, yeah, but have you seen those kids? Right? And now he said, we're looking at it different, saying, well, you know, we have to respond to that. That's where you get into, do you change everything for the kids that are being successful, or do you modify? We know this, that we have a system of schooling. We've created that over 100 years, that system. And when a kid doesn't fit that system, you know what we do? We create another system, right? Special ed is the biggest one. I mean, we had to have a law to do that because we weren't about to have those kids in school, right? That would just, how would we ever do that? Create a system. Alternative schools are systems, right? I mean, we create systems, and I think what we're trying to get at is, let's just look at a child, and we don't have to create another system. We just have to bring resources to how do we help that kid be successful. So, but this is a culture shift, huge, right? And so there's lots of, can we go back and just do delta indicators, right? Remember the good old days, we just had to do the delta stuff. Yes. Yeah. Would you all believe that you can do that today under the current regulations? You can. Under the old QPA regulations, it will say you take these courses or show the competencies in those. And now there's more we could do, because the challenge is, how do you do that in a big school or a small school? But I want to talk about easy things, right? I want to give you two examples. One is the young lady that I talked to, Jay and I had dinner with her family. There's a young lady that's a senior in high school, and here's her class schedule this year in a Kansas high school. Advanced Placement Physics, Advanced Placements Calculus BC, Advanced Placement English, Advanced Placement Government, Creative Writing, Choir, and I think a dual credit something. I couldn't remember the other. All right? She was recently in Nashville, just got her record contract, cutting her first album. You can go download her music right now on iTunes. She missed school to do that. And one of the courses she missed was choir. And the response was, you have to come in after school and make up the time and write a report. So this isn't right, this isn't where you're going. This is minor, right? And she did it, because she's a 4.0 student, by the way, who doesn't want to give up a high school experience, even though she's an extremely talented young lady. She wants to go to prom, and she's working on the plane, she's working on the bus, because she comes in, she has a 4.0 in her high school and that coursework. And yet we said to her as a system, if we did that for you, we'd have to do it for everyone. I've known John Thiston a long time. He never cut an album in Nashville. I'm just telling you, John never did that. So I was pretty safe there. That's small things, but Brad and I get to hear those conversations a lot. So I don't know, if we could just even tweak some of that thinking, that maybe if you have an album deal in Nashville, that could count for something in choir. I don't know. Maybe, you know. She did a TED Talk also and was paid extremely well, and came back and missed a speech in class and said, can I give you the URL to the TED Talk? And the teacher said, no, it's not on the topic that we were going to do. You have to give another speech. And she did it. And her parents are extremely supportive. They're not anti-school. They're extremely supportive. This is a wonderful family, right, Jay? It was fun. Before we get to where you are, which I agree is, you know, that would be great, credits and everything, I'd like to just start having that discussion. You know, about can we just look at talents of kids and say if they have some competencies, do they need others? And how do we develop that as a system? Or do we have to create another system? I think Kansas is saying, don't create another system. Let's just try to focus on the kids. And it's hard, Fred. It's hard. It's really hard because someone's going to try to game it, right? That's what's hard about it. So, John.
Is it safe, Randy, to end up looking at the vision for Kansas and saying those 6 outcomes, if we improve in those different areas, then ultimately we're going to improve in scores that we are expecting the kids to have too? Because at a national level, you can always expect there's going to be a desire to make a comparison. And that we're not probably going to be comparing that information. It'll probably still come down to a score at a national level.
Well, I mean, media and people will do, John, with reports what they want to do. We're trying to have the conversation, compare us on graduation rates. Compare us on the number of kids that are going on to be successful after high school. Right now, the board is saying, maybe with these 6, and they may add some more. They're trying not to get too many. Leave that up to you. We think that will drive us leading the world in student success. But they said this, Randy, when you talk to people, Brad, when you talk to people, Jay and Scott and all of us, we have to make sure that what we measure gets us to the desired outcome. And if it's showing in 2 or 3 years that it's not, just like proficiency going toward 90%, in our schools, John, you know this, you could have a conversation with any 5th grade teacher in any of our districts that said this kid was proficient in reading on the state exam. Oh yes, but they're not reading at grade level. Right? How can that be? Because our measure wasn't really what we were after. Does that make sense? So this may not drive it. The best thinking on the school board, the state board is, we think it will drive more kids to graduate high school. How do you graduate high school? You have to have some academic skills, right? You have to have some of these other skills. Leave that up to you, John, right? Work through the accreditation model, but we're going to have to measure, are these things leading to that? Are there unintended consequences? And if there are, we're going to have to make adjustments. And that's where you come in, because you're going to have to tell us, is that on the right road? So, yes, we'll still have state assessment, ACT scores, AIMSweb, MAP. We'll have all kinds of academic data. But should that drive local decisions about how to hit these, or do you want us to report that over and over and over? That's the question. Yes. Maxville. Not in the house. That's right. Can't speak about Coffeyville, but you can talk about Maxville. Great. Well, now here's the other part of this. When they arrived, how many of them needed remedial coursework? Because, I was telling you, John Thiston can't sing very well, but I know he could graduate kids out of Harrington High School, right? You know what? Line up. We're going. Everyone's going to graduate. I can raise that to 100% tomorrow, and every kid can sign, right? Course of study saying, we're all going to K-State and be an engineer. And McPherson, every 7th grade kid was going to be a veterinarian. They loved animals. All right? But when you look at some of those, and I'm not saying, Max, you want to look at that, are they arriving and we just didn't have the skill to be successful with whatever we're going to be? And if they did, hey, wouldn't we like to know that? And then, Maxwell, continue on, right? Continue on. So, yeah. All right. Thanks. I'm still collecting evidence. If you have anything you want to share.
All right. Thanks, Randy. Probably one of the most telling things to me of the tour and the data, because all of that we worked through K-State. They said the first thing before you even start analyzing it is do not go into the data looking for something. Go into it and find out what Kansas said. And one of the most telling things to me, both educators, communities, and businesses, of everything, 7% of everything they said, which was a high percent, was that our kids need to learn how to be good citizens and give back to their communities. And what's valuable to me, I had a call from a parent last May that said, can my school district legally require my daughter to serve 40 hours of community service for graduation? And my answer was, yeah, that's a local decision. Now I can say, and 2,000 Kansans, including business and industry, said they want that. So I think that's a lot of the value of what Kansas said, is to support you when you have those parents. Well, you can't make mine. Well, then find another district. Because our board says it's valuable, and over 2,000 Kansans said they wanted it. So anyway, as we get into more of it, I think it's just really important that there's a lot more than just academic readiness, which is critical, but we got to find a balance. So, Beth, I thought Jay was up next.
So my name is Beth Fultz, and I'm Assistant Director on the Career Standards and Assessment Services team. I just want to let you know that we're changing up the agenda a bit from what you have printed in front of you or on your computer. We're going to start with the career and technical education, because frequently we shortchange their presentation right before lunch, and we wanted to give you the spotlight today. So we'll follow that with the library media information, because we have some real important information to share with you. Then we'll go to standards, and we'll finish with assessments. We have a lot of staff mingled in amongst all of you, and so if you're on the CSAS team and you do have some slides to share as it gets close to your part in the presentation, just work your way to the front.
Thank you very much, Beth. First off, I can't follow Randy, so that was some great information, and hopefully gives you an idea of a peek into the vision of education in Kansas. My name is Jay Scott. I work at the Kansas State Department of Education. I work in career and technical education, so it's my pleasure to be here with you presenting today. Thank you for coming all across the state. I'm from western Kansas, so it's important that we as a state come together as much as we can, and in events like this and face-to-face, we try to make it available, there's different mediums out there, Zoom conferences, video conferences, but if you really, I've noticed when we really get in front of people and have that face-to-face conversation, that gets things done. So thank you for being here today. I'm just going to jump right in. Oh, I did want to say that I'm very happy that the Royals advanced to the ALCS, but not only because I'm a Royals fan lifelong, and it's just, just great to be a Royals fan right now, but that Colby Rasmus now has to wash his hair. I got tired. Now, his sister pitched for the Mets last night. I don't know if you guys saw that, but his sister pitched for the Mets last night. True story. I want to start off with CTE in Kansas. Just look at some of our statistics. Jumping into the numbers here. You might be wondering about this number. This is the number of students last year that were enrolled in a CTE course in Kansas schools. That's a lot of our CTE courses start at the 8th grade level. So this is all the students across Kansas, grades 8 through 12, enrolled in at least one CTE course. Now, you might be wondering how many students we have in Kansas. Well, we average about 35,000 students per grade in Kansas. So using that number and knowing that it's a different number every year, we're about at about 85 to 90% of our students are enrolled in career and tech ed. So when Randy's talking about career-ready students, we're starting to see it. We're starting to see students really gravitate towards those career classes that not only they need academically, but it aligns their career interests, their talents and abilities with academic core content and career technical skills to the point to where they're more prepared when they leave high school. And so we're very excited about this number. We pulled it from the STCO report. I know you're just as excited about the STCO report. But it's a great report giving us a lot of rich data to share across the state. Pathway growth. From last year, we had 2,469 total approved pathways across the state. Most schools, if you're into that competitiveness, I want as many pathways as my neighboring school. Most schools are around 6 to 7 pathways in their high schools. Some are more. I always point to Hillsborough High School. They've got 22 career pathways in their high school. So when people say, we just don't have the resources, the time, those kinds of things, that may well be true. But there are people, there are systems that are able to accommodate that. And we're all in this for students. And every student has a unique career interest. Why wouldn't we try to set up a system to allow that student to follow their career interests, whether it's a state-approved pathway or not? Central Heights will be the first to tell you they've got 21 state-approved pathways, but they have 25 career pathways for their students. They've set up a pathway for performing arts. They've set up pathways for state-approved pathways. That's great quality career and technical education. So just some things to think about. But last year, 2,469. This year, over 2,700 pathways across the state. Great growth across the state. You know, I've had the pleasure of being invited to several grand openings, or at least breaking ground on new college and career centers in school districts. Just yesterday I was down in Pittsburgh. They've opened, they call it CTEC, Career Technical Education Center for Crawford County in southeast Kansas. And they're able to, what they can't do at their high school level, they're able to provide courses that maybe don't fit at their high school for their students so they can complete pathways. There's a lot of great work going on. I know Baser Linwood is working on adding on to their high school a career and tech center. Lawrence just opened up a college and career center. I would encourage any of you to go and visit that new model of secondary education. So there's a lot of growth there. There was a 20 plus increase in the pathways in these specific pathways. And what I'm very proud of the work that you all do in your schools. And know this, that these additional pathways did not generate one single extra dime for that district, because we're under a block grant funding model. So kudos to the schools out there for doing the right thing and adding pathways when they know the funding's not going to follow that. This is a look at our flower chart for career and technical education. I did want to, I've got a few people on our staff here with us today I want to recognize. We've got a health science cluster, Mr. Martin Coleman. Martin, raise your hand right there. He is our health science consultant. He's also all-knowing in the world of Perkins. He's got a wealth of knowledge with that, so thank you for being here. We also have manufacturing, architecture, construction, transportation, distribution, and logistics. I know these are small. Law and public safety and security. Peggy Torrens back in the back. There's Peggy. She's a consultant in those areas. And we have a team, very nimble team, you should see in your schools, that goes around the state and helps with these clusters and these pathways being applied at the school level. So I want to talk a little bit about this. This is really kind of a seminal document for our work. But these are career fields. So if we're talking about career education, what's a model to follow to help your students be more prepared and help them follow those careers that they're passionate about? Well, these are career fields. So I'm just going to start with this one. Environmental and ag systems, that's a big old bucket of related occupations. And we think it's a great place to start. So those are the career fields. Oops. For K-6, it's okay. So K-6 is a great place to start with the career fields. How many of you know your elementary kids, they go and visit the fire department, right? They go and visit, they just get exposed to different careers. This is a good model because gosh, when they're that age, you know, it changes from minute to minute what they want to do, and how hungry they are. I'm talking about my sons. So, but these career fields, if our kids in K-6 could be exposed to these career fields, they'd get a better idea of what all entails in those career fields. And then we could move to the clusters at the middle grades. The clusters, there are 16 of them, and they're a little smaller bucket, but still a pretty general look at occupations and related occupations. This is a very important level. So when we're talking about individual plans of study, we feel this is the best time for students to take a career interest survey, find out the career interests and talents that they have, and start aligning those with some different careers that are out there. Do a lot of heavy career interest work and career exploration at the cluster level. And then when you get to the pathways, this is a great time. We think our pathways are great experiences for our students. I know schools have set up quality career pathways that include a professional learning experience. Yes, they're very hard to set up, but the work that's being done is paying off because those students, if they can actually go out and be in a simulated environment in the workplace, it's amazing. Amazing the growth in that student. And that's at the end of pathways in high school, that's something that's a big push right now. Professional learning experiences, either in your school or outside your school, simulating those jobs. But you know, it's not about selecting a career while you're in high school. It's more about exploring different careers. What we hear a lot is, well, I had this student, they were kind of, this is from a counselor, they wanted to start into construction design, and then they switched semester, and they were interested in plant systems, and then their junior year they started really getting into AV communications. That's great. That student is going to be able to make, I know it's difficult, but that student's going to be able to make a more informed decision than ever before. I've told this story before, but when I graduated high school, I declared a major of international business. You guys should be laughing because that usually elicits a lot of laughter. But international business because it sounded good in the paper. I didn't have a business class in high school. I took keyboarding. So our students, I think, while we have them, while it's safe, time and money, it's a safe environment, it's important for them to experience careers in a more authentic way than ever before. Okay, so just some new stuff. Cluster reviews. Each year, we review multiple of the 16 career clusters, we review those on a 5-year basis. So every 5 years, standards are reviewed in science. Every 5 years, standards are reviewed in social studies. Oh, I'm sorry, Dawn. Dawn is our government and public administration pathway consultant. Raise your hand, Don, right there. And he is going through a cluster review this year, having a lot of fun with that. But every 5 years we do math standards. Every 5 years we do science. Every year in Career and Tech Ed we're doing a cluster, at least 3, usually. So last year, marketing, these are clusters. Manufacturing, human services were all revamped. They will be new in 16, 17. And the people that are in your districts that work in CTE have been alerted to this. The new pathway design sheets are out because the application process opens in November, mid-November. So we have to be working a year ahead as people apply for new pathways. Clusters to be reviewed this year: government and public administration, hospitality and tourism, transportation, distribution, and logistics. Those will be new in 17 and 18. Assessments. So this group is used to being talked to or talked with about assessments. And so if you have questions on these, let's get them out there. The Career Pathways Assessment System called CPAS has been around for a while. There are 2 types of assessments being developed. The general CT assessment is for students midway through a pathway, so maybe they're in that technical level course, and it measures students. It has test items for academics, for leadership, and employability. And I want to hesitate on this one, because that's a big one. I don't know if there are a lot of other assessments out there that actually measure employability, but how it proposes to do that, this test, it puts students in scenarios and has them respond. And it's very interesting because how they respond, the correct answers were developed by business and industry. So this is a true, if you're looking for input from business and industry, this is authentic. They have actually decided what are the correct answers for these employability test items. CETE did that work. And so that's a general CTE assessment, not specific to a pathway. The other types of tests are pathway specific, and it's usually for students that are completing that pathway, towards the end of the pathway. And it's based solely, it's full of technical skill test items. Technical skills just for that area. We'll look at some here in a second. Each assessment developed includes 100 sit-down computerized test items that can be done in 2 sections. So no more of that. You can, if you're on an hourly, 7-hour day, you can break this up. You can take it one part of the test, 50 test items in one class period, and pick it up in another. And what we're very excited about are the CCQs, Career Competency Qualifications. It's a performance assessment. And so when we're talking about authentic assessments and actually putting students in that situation and simulating, and it's not, as Randy said, it's not a simulated environment. They're actually doing it. And it's quite a system that's been set up, a lot of moving parts, very difficult to pull this off, but we're doing it because we think that kids really should be able to show us what they know and can do in these areas. And then that is a link to the website for CPAS if you want more information there. Okay, this is the timeline. I know schedules are very important. We have these assessments that are complete. The general, Comp Ag, Animal Systems, Plant Systems, Manufacturing, Production are complete and ready to go. The test window opens coming up in November, and it closes May of 2016. So a very wide open, long testing window. You register kids just like you do for state assessments through the KIDS system for these assessments. Score reports, very important, come out in July. And then the CCQ development, the CCQs for the general CTE are ready for spring 2016. Comp Ag CCQs, the performance assessments are already out there this fall. And students can be taking those now. So this is a look at the CCQ schedule. Any questions on anything with CPAS? Yes. The question is, are the CCQs given in a work environment? The answer is kind of, or can be. Some of these, like, here's a cool one, Comprehensive Ag, one of the performance assessments is administering a shot to a steer. Now, I grew up on a farm, I've done it, I found out I was horrible at it through this process. But students can do that, perform that assessment at an FFA event. So we've incorporated where the teacher can do it in their classroom. That's the default. If there's a chance that this assessment can take place in a workplace, do it. That's great. So it's wide open. Most of these assessments are rubric-based. Then you have a rater, yes. And what our hope is that we can get people in those business and industry to come in and score students and rate them as they go through it. Yes. So can it happen out in this internship? Right, it can. Now the teacher needs to be involved in that because the teacher is going to be trained on how to administer the test, and they need to train on the rubric. But yeah, as long as you've got that, and those internship relationships are huge, and if students might take it a little bit more seriously too, knowing that there's going to be a performance assessment as part of that internship. So great question. Good question. Others? Okay. I wanted to make a special point of emphasis on industry-recognized certifications. Name some. Name one. CNA, AWS, and welding. How many of you have students certified already in Microsoft? Microsoft Office? Surely that cannot be true. I know that we have, sitting in our audience, Julie Canizo from Goddard Public Schools. They have a student that got second in the world in PowerPoint. This wouldn't really be good it wouldn't be good to show him this, right? We need to hire him. I want to hire him to do my slides. So he got second in the world. Before that, he got certified in Microsoft, but he's second in the world in PowerPoint. Amazing, amazing young man. So certifications are a game changer for students. Yes, a diploma is important. Absolutely. But what is also important, a game changer, is an industry-recognized certification because they can take that anywhere. Now, not all business and industry recognize certain industry-recognized certifications, but if it has a name, and we've got a list, and we're working on this list to finalize it, and we'll post it on our website. But we feel like it's very important that schools start keeping track of the students who earn industry-recognized certifications, because that's going to be something, that's definitely a sign that that student is college and career ready. So we think that it's very important that schools start tracking. These are the students that we have who have earned an industry-recognized certification. We have a state-approved list on our website, and we'll have that out very soon. That if you're wondering, okay, what are some of these certifications? Any questions on that? Okay, we have some new student categories, CTE student categories beginning not this year, but in 16-17. So everything's the same for this year for CTE student categories. But in the future, in 16-17, we're going to change a participant. And these two, participant and concentrator, are student categories that we have to report to the federal government to justify Perkins dollars to continue to flow into the state of Kansas. So we ask that schools report this every spring. A participant, and again, this is 16-17, is a student that's completed half a credit of CTE, not a full credit, as it is now. The reason for that, most of our intro courses are indeed semester courses. So we want to reflect what's actually going on out there in our schools. So a participant would be a student completing a half credit of CTE in 16-17. Concentrators would move from currently it's 3 credits and completing a pathway to 2 credits because they're kind of majoring in a pathway or concentrating in a pathway. So that's more of a nomenclature change. A concentrator is a student that is midway through a pathway, majoring in it, may change their mind, may not, but they're concentrating in it. A completer would then become a student that would complete a pathway. And we are in discussions right now amongst our team on what should a completer actually do to earn that status as a completer. So that will be determined this year, and we'll roll that out for 16-17. Some ideas could be, well, it would be a student that completes 3 credits. Maybe they pass a technical skill assessment or a certification. But we want to make sure that students who are completers, that whatever they do, it means something for them going into post-secondary. So we've got some work to do here. We're very excited about the CTE Scholar Program. For years, it might seem that the only students that make honors in Kansas, it's all related to their academic achievement and their GPA. We want to expand that. We want to expand that recognition to students who are not only getting it done academically, but technical skill-wise, employable, leadership. We want to blow it off the top with a recognition program in Kansas. Now that's a name that we're running past some students, so it's not going to be up there long. But CTE Scholar, I'm sure it'll have a different name. But those are new categories we're rolling out in Kansas. And in fact, I've got one person that's working on this team, Kendall Workentine in the back. He's on our committee to develop the CTE Scholar Program, so we're excited about that. Real quick on funding. Before this year, we had 0.5 funding for a good many years. That was weighted funding based on students enrolled in tech and application level courses. This is what the funds were to be used for. And under the block grant for this year and the next school year, schools will still receive that same amount of CTE funding they received last year in a block grant. The only difference is it won't be earmarked specifically for CTE. But what we've told people over and over is stay the course. Who knows what the new funding model will look like. So the CTE funds are in the block grant for the next 2 years, and it's a fixed amount, whatever you got last year. And then I guess we'll figure out the funding model as we go along. All right. And lastly, I want to end on a positive. February is CTE month. It's not too early. It's not too early. I know all of you have got all your Christmas shopping done, so you're ready to go for February. February is CTE month. We want to recognize student achievement. Sorry, Randy, I used that word. We want to recognize student success in CTE. So if you could, and I know you've got students like this walking around every day, is send to me, just email them to me, a photo or a video, 3 minutes or less. Send it to KSDE, and then during the February, we will roll out those photos and videos of student success in CTE on our social media sites. You do need to make sure that students have signed that piece of paper and parents have signed that piece of paper to release their photos to all those things. If you don't have those for a student, we've got that form. We can send it to you. But we want a bunch of photos and videos to recognize our students. So I know kids don't often use Facebook anymore, but we do, right? So we can send them out there. But anyway, that's for February. I'm going to stop there. Are there any questions regarding CTE, Career and Tech Ed? I've numbed them. I've numbed them, yes, successfully. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. So I want to introduce, and it's my privilege to introduce Jackie Lakin. She's going to talk to us about library media standards.
Thank you very much. I am going to speak for just a moment about library media standards. I want you to know that, first of all, there's been a little confusion. I've gotten a couple phone calls from administrators because they have been told that the new program standards that were just accepted by the state board are the new pre-K through 12 standards, and they're not. So the pre-K through 12 standards will be coming up it won't be January, but sometime after February, the state board will be receiving them. The committee members have been selected, 2 from each state board region. Meeting dates are being established. We have a very low budget, so we're trying to think of how to use technology wisely. So that's basically why we're having online communications. Then feedback to the committee prior to working on the standards. The feedback was that if you think about the library media and technology standards, they shouldn't be a huge amount of standards. It should be something that could happen in one 30-minute period once a week, maybe for 30 weeks in the school year. So when you begin to think of that, we're trying to come at it for a very different way when the school librarian has a limited amount of time that they can work with the actual students. So that's that, but the exciting part that I wanted you to see, and I'm going to probably have Teresa come up and switch this for me, is that I heard some of you talking last May at the curriculum leaders meeting, and you were talking about resources that you needed and that maybe you were paying a lot of money for, or the resources were ones that you couldn't afford. And I thought about our partner at the State Library of Kansas. The State Library of Kansas, which used to be called the Kansas State Library, but everybody confused it with K-State's library, so they had to change their name. But anyway, they buy a statewide license for a lot of products, not just for education, but they buy them for everyone in the state of Kansas. I thought that everyone knew a lot about these resources, but I'm a little concerned that perhaps you don't. So Allie Lockwood is going to talk to you about resources, and I do have a handout available. And Allie will stay here at lunchtime and answer your questions if you have some. So Allie, here you go.
All right, thank you. All right. I have notes, so I stay very brief and on topic. Well, I'm Allie Lockwood, and I work in the Statewide Services Division of the State Library of Kansas. We work with ebooks, audiobooks, databases, and other online resources for people all over the state of Kansas. And today I'm just going to talk about a few of those resources that are great for students. This is our main online resources page. Links on these pages have geolocation technology in them. The pages should see that the patron or student is in Kansas and not need to log in to access any of these resources. If at your school or somewhere in your district they aren't able to access this, let us know and we can fix that. We also have resources split up into 2 groups for students. This is our page for middle and high school databases. Key resources are separated by topic to help students find resources easier. And any of these links you can add to your own school websites for students to access. You can also share with students and parents as well. And this is the online resource page for elementary age students. This has links to databases for research, as well as sites for learning and ebooks. And both of these student pages have links for teachers and librarians. Now just to talk about a few of the resources. Learning Express Library is an online learning program with 9 different learning centers. These learning centers have tutorials, ebooks, practice tests, and more. Students do need to register to create their own account, and this saves their work in progress. Of the 9 learning centers, there are probably 3 that are most important for students. The school center has sections for elementary, middle, and high school students, starting at 4th grade. The elementary level has math and reading skills improvement, and that includes things like geometry, measurement and data, and writing and language practice. The middle school section has math and language arts, as well as geography and American history, plus the high school entrance exam prep. And then the high school level has various math, language arts, science, and social studies skills practice tutorials, plus logic and reasoning practice. There's also a college prep center, and this has practice tests, interactive tutorials, and ebooks to help students prepare for college entrance exams like SAT, ACT, PSAT, as well as writing college admission essays. The Computer Skills Center has videos and tutorials for internet basics, Microsoft software, Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator, and then Windows and Mac operating systems. For language learning, we have Mango Languages. Right now, there are interactive lessons for over 70 languages, plus 19 courses for English for speakers of other languages, as well as other specialty courses, plus movies with a number of subtitle options and interactive models. With this, you can create an account to save progress or enter quickly as a guest if students just want to jump in and practice Spanish or French. And they also have a mobile app that is available through the statewide subscription. Explora is the new multi-search interface from EBSCO, and EBSCO is the host of many of our database products. We have many different Exploras for different levels. We have an elementary version, a middle school version, and a high school version, as well as one for librarians and educators. With Explora, students can do a single search, and it will bring up results from many different databases. This allows students to research without having to know what specific database they need to be searching in. There are browsable topics and topic overviews with encyclopedia entries, plus AP videos and photos, and a number of search limiters within your search. The Teacher Resource Explorer has research tools, lesson plans, student tools, curriculum standards, and helpful sites. Our other big research database is Encyclopedia Britannica. Again, this has multiple versions, one for elementary, middle, and high school. Articles with appropriate vocabulary for the age will be returned, and once you're within an article, you can change reading levels to something easier or harder. So if a student gets in there and thinks maybe it's too easy or too hard, they're able to switch without ever leaving the article they're in. Britannica also has resources for teachers, and this includes content tied to the Common Core standards, and they allow all of their videos and photos to be used in student and teacher presentations. They also have a special section of interactive activities for kids, and this includes interactive maps, compare countries, learning games, and images and videos. And then I just want to talk about a couple more resources we have. Sage Knowledge is a new one we've added. It has over 70 ebooks and reference materials related to the social sciences. These are resources that can be used by many students all at the same time. And the books and chapters can be saved, printed, emailed, shared. And then Sage Stats, a different product from the same company, has statistical data from more than 200,000 government and non-government data stats. And that's for US states, counties, cities, and zip codes. And it includes topics like economy, health, crime and law enforcement, and immigration. The last one I'll mention is Kansas History 1854 to 1865. It's unique to Kansas. It's a database that covers Kansas history from the territorial years through the Civil War. It's searchable and has selected topics with essays and links to documents. This database is basically a digital archive of the history in Kansas in that time period. It's filled with information and various types of resources. There's personal narratives and memoirs, pamphlets and political speeches, sermons and songs, as well as children's books. And the last one I want to share is not a database. It's one of our ebook products from Britannica called Britannica eStacks. And these are kids' nonfiction ebooks. This has no school use restrictions, so teachers can use these in their curriculum. They can assign a class to read them, and they could read the book. Every kid could have their own computer or laptop and read the book at the same time. There's also many titles in Spanish. Titles are mostly for younger kids, but the reading level does go up to grade 7. And that is all I have today. We have many, many more resources, and I have kind of talked about some of those on that sheet, but feel free to contact us at any time. These 2 email addresses will reach everybody in statewide services, so if one of us isn't available, somebody else can help. Thanks. Yes, in Learning Express, there's a career and job accelerator section, and that includes prep for occupational exams. They can also take career tests to see where their interests maybe will take them in a direction for a certain career. And Learning Express, it does have a ton of resources. There's a college center, and adult learning, and those cover basic math and reading skills as well. Thanks.
All right, my name is Susie Myers, and I'm the Language Arts and Literacy Consultant for KSDE on the Career Standards and Assessment team. Beth was teasing me because usually I walk all around, and I think they set the room up this way so that I would have to stand in one place. But I don't have very much to share with you today. I just wanted to let you know about something that we have coming that will go out either tomorrow or early next week for English language arts teachers. We were trying to figure out a way to address some of the needs that teachers were telling us they had, and you all were telling us what you wanted from professional learning, while also considering constraints of time, money, and geography in our state. And so we thought a lot about what can we do that honors those constraints, but also provides some of the things that we know to be good professional learning. And so this is what we are offering for English language arts or teachers of English language arts K-12, the virtual communities of practice. So the focus is going to be meaningful, ongoing, inquiry-based, collaborative professional learning for K-12 teachers of English language arts. There are going to be 4 cohorts, 4 communities of practice going on that are each capped at 30. We'll have an elementary and secondary in western Kansas, and elementary and secondary in eastern Kansas. There will be a total of 6 meetings. The kickoff and the closing meetings in western Kansas will be in Oakley, Kansas, and the kickoff and closing meetings for eastern Kansas will be in Eudora. We do have 1 hour of college credit available. So we are capping those at 30 participants. And I will say, too, that we're looking for people who are really going to be committed to this ongoing, in-depth professional learning. We, of course, do offer, if you just want a shorter thing or invite somebody to come in and present to your staff, we still do that as well. So if that's more something that you need, you can contact me or any of the content consultants, and we can get someone out to help you. And that's all.
Okay, so Jeanette Novo is the Assistant Director on the standards side for the Career Standards and Assessment Services team, and she isn't able to be here today, so I'm going to fill in for the slides that she's presented, that she's prepared, and she isn't here to present. So one thing you need to know about some changes happening on our team is that our science consultant has left and taken another job, still working with the science standards, something he's very passionate about, you all know. So in the interim, the rest of the standards folks are kind of picking up some of the slack, and we've assigned one of our consultants on the research and evaluation team, who happens to be elementary certified and has taught math and science, and he's Zach Conrad. He's not here today, but he's going to pick up some of the science assessment work. And then with mathematics, we've also kind of, Melissa's Fast is our mathematics consultant, and she's, the math and science partnership work right now is demanding a lot of her time, so Zach will also be working on the math assessment side. So for the math side, you have two contacts, Melissa or Zach, and on the science side right now, if you'll just run your questions through Zach or straight to Jeanette, that's kind of how we're organized until we can get some people hired. Okay, so Melissa wanted me to let you know that she had an acceleration task force. They met in July, and they created some resources that will be released at the annual conference. Okay, it's very exciting work that they're doing. They have a roadmap for grades 6 through 12 for districts to use. Math is a highway success document they're going to be sharing, and a video. Their annual conference, they're going to do a general session called Wisdom of Oz to address acceleration. They have some people from the field that have worked on this project, and I just think it'll be a wonderful session. If you're interested in accelerated math, you should try to attend. The other thing the group worked hard over the summer doing is preparing a guide, a standards guide for parents with activities for K through 5, and that is posted on the math website, and if you need that resource, it's available. Check it out. It's very user-friendly, written in language that should be that most parents would be able to help their children with the tasks. And finally, like I said, the Math Science Partnership is gearing up for a new competition. They're very busy with the rewrite of all those requirements and everything. More information to come on that. So, just some standards update. Are you doing this? I'm doing this. Okay. Well, you get a plug for this twice, actually. We're extremely excited to be able to continue with the pre-conference assessment day. So I have some information later in the slide. I'll just share it now, and then you can read it later. The pre-conference day has been reorganized a bit. The morning will kick off with a new test coordinator training that Lee Jones will present and share information and help new test coordinators. So if any of you have new test coordinators in your district and they haven't registered to come to the pre-conference, I highly recommend they come, because we're changing up the training on that, and it will be a pretty specific step-by-step for what new test coordinators need to know. Following that, we'll do our traditional test security training, and it's a pretty popular session because if you come and you sign in and you go through the training, that meets the requirement for what you need to do to be able to go back to your districts and train all of your teachers to administer the assessment. And then following the test security, in the morning we'll have a plenary session that will be what to expect with the 2016 assessments. All the nuts and bolts, everything that we used to cover in expanded time will be abbreviated. So that will be the morning. In the afternoon, our standards folks have worked very hard to come up with some sessions that will engage you in developing activities around the standards-based instruction and assessment. See, that it could be much expanded on if you had wanted to present your own slides. I'm moving through this.
It's just all of this once we've got together, we've decided we're going to have kind of a common format, science, math, Matt Craig will be
CPAS, Kids Help Desk.
Doing it so that we can give you a couple shots, two sessions in the afternoon where you can get familiarize yourself with the assessments and assessment practices that we have that are kind of unique to each discipline.
Right. We're excited that we can offer you an opportunity. We tried this last year. It seemed to go fairly well. The biggest critique we got back in the evaluations is that we wanted to go to 2 sessions. And so we shortened the sessions. Each of the curriculum staff will have people from the field working with them. It should be an exciting time for how to really implement that standards-based instruction and how to use assessments in the classroom. So these are the topics that will be covered. We will also provide a session for anyone that wants to come to listen to kids, KSDE Help Desk, Kite, and the Help Desk with Kite. So we'll be doing a session for that. If any of your technology people or your kids people or your test directors, if that's where they want to go, we'll have that opportunity too. And then Melissa just wanted me to point out to you that she does have the outside presenters that she's going to have measuring student learning and mathematics for the pre-conference session. So these PowerPoints will be available. Teresa will put them up, and it'll be with the streaming, so you can read the information. Okay, standards review. So we have, for the last year almost, had the standards out on our website for people to go in and make comment. We've encouraged all of you to do it. Time is starting to narrow on your ability to make comments about the standards, and we will be forming committees in January to start the process of looking at the English Language Arts and Mathematics standards. I know, we just gave the assessment for the first time last year, and we're talking about reworking the standards, but it's important work. As Jay mentioned, we review those on a periodic cycle, and it's time to look at them again. We'll have about 25 members per committee. We'll be taking nominations for that, representing all the board districts and our educational constituents across the state. There will be a face-to-face meeting. A lot of this work this time will be done online. So again, the website for reviewing standards is going to close on October 30th. So if you have your comments, get them in. So the standards review going on right now. We have physical education and health, world language, driver's ed, counseling, and music. Music just presented to the state board at this past meeting. Assessments, what everyone's been waiting on. We tried to push it as close to launch for a very specific reason. So what can I tell you about assessments? First, I'm going to talk about 2015, and then I'll let you know about 2016. 2015, the student reports and the building and district data from CETE is available on their website. And I know if you were at the networking session this morning, that both groups talked about how to access the information on the ksassessments.org page. On Monday, we opened what's been called Traditionally Check Your Data. That's on our authenticated website. That's called Measurable Objectives 2. It is a secure site. It's only available to those that have permission to look at the data. It's embargoed data. It's not public until it's released on the building report card in December. But the purpose of reviewing that data is because we've talked several times about the 2015 assessment data being the baseline year for determining future growth of students as they perform for academic achievement. So it is important to go in and check your data, make sure that if you have any ambiguous students that you get those issues resolved. Look at your participation rate, it's there. Lee Jones and Kelly Spurgeon, raise your hands, they're available to talk with you over lunch or later this afternoon. If you have any problems at all with checking your data, you think something doesn't look right, catch one of either Kelly, Lee, or myself, and we will try to provide you the technical assistance we can. If we can't answer it, we'll take your information, go back and research it, and call you on Monday. The building report card will be released at the December board meeting. We have always in the past allowed districts and buildings to look at their data before we release it publicly. So although you're looking at everything in the measurable objectives on the authenticated website, it will have a new look, and we do want you to be able to preview it. It will be, again, on an embargoed basis, and you'll have a chance to look at it sometime after Thanksgiving before the board meets. So you won't be surprised what you see, or the press won't be calling, and you won't be prepared. The other thing I wanted to talk about 2015 is the federal accountability piece, and that's our annual measurable objectives. For the 2015 year, the only two measures that buildings will be accountable for would be the graduation rate and participation. Okay, so it is important when you're looking at check your data that you're sure all kids are and that you've met your participation rate. And if there are questions about that, you need to let us know, because we won't be able to make any changes to the data after October 31st. I mean, that's the end. They have to roll everything to the new year, and we can't go back and fix things after that. So we're here, we're available to help you. What's exciting about 2016, I've provided just some general information for you about the subjects we're testing. Everything's pretty much the same as last year. English, language, arts, and math, grades 3 through 8 and 10. Science will be a field test on the new standards. That's exciting. You don't have to test on the old standards anymore. And the history, government, social studies will be, last year we field tested it. This year we're giving the assessment. I just want you to know that the results from the history, government, social studies test will be delayed, because just as we went through setting process for English, language, arts, and math this past summer, we will need to do that for the history, government, social studies test in the summer of 2016. So probably be releasing data in 2 different batches next year. And the dynamic learning maps for the kids that take the alternate assessment, that's English, language, arts, and math, science, and we do have a history, government, social studies alternate assessment also. The testing window, what you need to know is that we've had to delay CETE what is not able to, what we figured out over the process. I apologize for having some miscommunication with you over the time, but CETE isn't able to operate 2 years at once in the KITE system. So since we're still working on changing some data with Check Your Data, they still have to have the 2015 system open. And that's open, will be open until Friday the 23rd for making changes with CETE. So they will be able to switch over the weekend, and then on Monday the 26th, they'll start accepting TEST records for the current year. Okay, so I know a lot of you set up TEST records, and then you try to go into KITE, especially if you're trying to do some DLM work, and the information wasn't there. That's the reason. We had to operate 2 systems at once, and this year, because of our having to set cut scores and go through the whole process, everything was just delayed. In the future, we expect CETE to be able to roll KITE over in a timely manner and start accepting test records much earlier. But that's this year. So October 26th, they will start processing TEST records. So I don't know if it's on the next slide or not, but it's also a good time to tell you that we're not doing the listening field test, okay? So it wasn't really possible if they couldn't process TEST records until the day the window opened for the listening field test to think that you were going to be able to administer the listening field test. Just wasn't going to work out. But we had been in the process of trying to figure out, well, what can we do? Is it necessary? Do we really need it or not? And So they figured out a way that we can give it in the general assessment in the spring, and it won't be adaptive. Everyone will just have fixed form like we did last year with our test, but there won't be a field test, except for School for the Deaf, and they are going to pilot this for us. So the other thing I want to point out to you is that we do have 2 windows. The performance task is early. It closes before most of you go on spring break. The machine scored will open, and you would give that part of the assessment when you come back. If you take our overview sheet, add up all the time that would be required for students to take the state assessment, and this is just the average amount of time for most students. We understand there are exceptions on both ends of the scale, but if you look at the 8th grade student that has to take English language arts, math, science, and history government, both the performance task and the machine scored, and you add up the total recommended time for taking a state assessment, it comes out to less than 1 full school day. Now, I know that there have been issues about too much testing, and it's really going to be on the building how you schedule your time to give the assessment. Because now that our assessments are, the kite engine is working properly, you can give multiple sessions of the test on the same day at the same setting. Whatever information we shared in the past about how you have to take one part of the test and then wait till the next day and sign in, that's gone. All the glitches hopefully are worked out. That's what last year was all about. And this year, you can give the assessment, chunk it up however you want, but the total time that the state is asking you to give back for state assessments is about 1 day of the school years. We're really working hard to minimize the footprint of state assessments for you. OPA 21. We will be administering an English language learners assessment this year, and you will need headphones for the students. And if the listening test, they're going to need headphones too. So the question that I've been answering a lot is, do we still need to have headphones for all students? And the answer would be yes. The OPA 21 kids will need the microphones with theirs.
So Beth, do we know about the speaking part of it that has to go?
On the OPA 21, so we're still working out all the details with that. CETE just has received the consortium test. We're supposed to be meeting next week, and we'll be getting information out to you. There's a possibility that window might need to change a little bit. We might open the ELL window earlier than what we had previously said. I just don't have any answers right now on that one. Assessment questions. We're here to answer them individually, or if you have something for the group, we can answer them now. So the federal law says that 1% of your students can take the alternate assessment for accountability reasons. Now, certainly we believe that any child that should take the alternate assessment should be offered that assessment, should be testing the child, giving the assessment that's appropriate for the child. So, but we still are under, with the ESCA waiver and authorization still says we have to cap the amount for accountability purposes at 1%. So when you're in the complete student test file, and you'll see a column that says reclassification, if there's a mark by the student, then that student's been reclassified. And then on the left side of the page, if you feel like, for whatever reason, that your school should be allowed more than 1% of the students and the reclassification's inappropriate, then there's a waiver request that you can submit to have it reviewed. That's pretty much the same as what we've done before, except before is the directions are with the document when you open the document. So I'm not sure what you're wanting us. Right. So there's a document that's a guidance document on the measurable objective page that will walk you through what you should look for and the process that you should follow. What used to be called check your data, like the check your data document, now it's called the guidance document. And if you open up the document that's posted there, it will walk you through the process, verifying and checking that. And then Kelly Spurgeon would be more than happy to walk through that with you too. So the level 1, so the performance levels on the assessment, level 1, 2, 3, 4, those won't change. No, that won't change.
Let me give you an example, and I'll use my daughter. She's been a B student all the way in math, does really good math work. She gets to her freshman year, she's a senior now, she gets to her freshman year, and her high school math teacher, who I've known since college, at parent-teacher conference said, Brad, been doing very good math all the way through. Pretty much a B student, but I can tell you right now, I know every one of my freshmen, without having to give them a test, I can pretty much tell you who's going to get a 22 on the ACT in math. And she's not there. She's at that 18, 19, doing very good grade level work all the way through. But I'm telling you, she is not, I can't tell you as her teacher, honestly, as a parent, I'm confident that she's going to get a 22, but I'll get her there. Here's what she's going to have to do. I can tell you right now the types of skills that she's lacking. He sent stuff home. We worked her freshman, sophomore year, and she got a 25. First time, she got a 20. Second time, she got a, so when to do, I can tell you right now the types of skills that she's lacking. He sent stuff home. We worked her freshman, sophomore year, and she got a 25. First time, she got a 20. Second time, she got a, so when the test was written to the grade level standards, and when you look at a level 2 descriptors of what the child can do, you're going to see that's a pretty, that kid is doing grade level work and really well. But then look at the level 3 and say, but you know what? As a parent, I think we need to get, and this is what the teacher said this summer, we need to get them to this level of work for me to confidently say, we're ready for Algebra 1, and that's totally different. Every parent-teacher conference I went to, never once, and I've been to great schools, never once did a teacher ever sit down with me as a parent and say, let me tell you, exceed standard, what your child can do. It was a label. And I had no idea throughout the whole time. I knew, now I sat at home and did math with my kids, and I knew that they were doing pretty good, but for the very first, I had a math teacher, freshman math teacher, have the conversation with me that your daughter is a good math student, but I can tell you right now they're not going to score a 22, but I can get them there. So that's a totally different conversation. When the 160 teachers this summer said, when we look at a performance level 2, that is a really good student. They're doing grade level work, they're there, but for me to be able to tell a parent that they're doing college, does that make sense? But and again, that is why they said we're going to number them. As soon as you put a name on a performance category, you're back to what you're approaching, you're exceeding, and that was a huge debate, and there was arguments for, against, but the final decision was let's number them. What does a level 2 mean? That 4 number them. What does a level 2 mean? That 4 is the conversation. Well, let's go to the performance level descriptor, because on the old assessments, as soon as there was a label like approaching, we stopped there, and even the old ones didn't have the descriptors to be able to say, well, so take the old one with 5 performance categories. They were a level 2 at that time. Well, what does that mean? Well, go find out. Does that mean approaching? Well, we never even had that. So I really think it's going to be a huge shift for us to have conversations with parents to say, let me tell you, and I remember a year and a half ago sitting there trying to think about the dial. You have gas. Am I 3/4 of a tank? That's important to know. And when you look at, and we'll talk level 2, am I a low, am I a high? We never told them that in the past. We said, you're this label, that you're at the high end, low, so that's why you've got to have some visuals. For the visual learners, you've got to have the main thing, the descriptors and the conversations about what can they do. Again, I was so appreciative of that math teacher being honest with me and saying, they're doing great work. She's not going to get a 22 on the ACT unless we really bear down. And they did, but the way, so how do we go back even into the 7th, 6th to say they're really doing good work? Look at level 2. Those are good. They can do a lot of good work. I've read all of those performance levels. You have a lot of good level 2 kids. And I'm excited about where we can go with this. Okay. Again, that's one of those things when we were putting all that together last minute, I'm sitting in his office and he's scratching his head and he's like, and where's Kelly? Kelly's back there, and I walk in, and Kelly's like, we got a problem, Houston. Because as soon as you put that there, we go back to an old system of a have and have not, a pass-fail. You're over the bar, under the bar. And it was the last minute, and we called CET, and they said, no, Kinko's just delivered them. You are exact. We have got to change that bar and align everything to the left, and from left to right. And you're right. And Kelly picked up on that about a week before, and I walked into Scott's office, and we're like, all of this look, and all of this, and no one caught that there was a bar there, and kids are to the left of it. And we were like, and we were on. So you are exactly right. The letters, all of that stuff, we can do things with them, and that's one of them, because it's just this old mindset that we can't let people say that if you're below a 3, you're failing. And that's something we're pulling. I was sitting in the bleachers 2 Friday nights ago with a superintendent up in northeast Kansas at a football game, and I was like, so how's it going? I go, oh man, our test results are terrible. And I started talking to him about it. He was thinking if you were below a 3, you're a failing kid. And I was like, have you looked at the performance? Oh, we got to do, it's going to be a huge, but eventually I'm going to have more conversations with my younger ones, with parents, just like I was so glad that freshman math teacher said, I didn't have to test them. She's a freshman. But I can tell you pretty much all my freshmen who are going to struggle and not get there because of the types of things they can't do yet, they can do a lot of great stuff. And I said, we're here. She was bringing stuff home and stuff, and he did it. And and it's a huge shift. But those letters, give us input. And we're sitting there, how many parents know what a claim is? The only reason I do is because I hang out with these, So those are the types of things we got to get it. But I never once as a parent, and many of you are parents, had that conversation with the math or ELA about, let me tell you what, and again, here's all the other things. This is just one indicator. Here's the other ways. Plus, let me tell you, here's another thing. Your daughter's persistency, look how many times she gave up on work. And that was an example. She's actually a lot more persistent than I am. Now, I got another child, so. Well, on the parent letter, underneath the dials and stuff, then it goes in, and for example, on a level 2 one, then right underneath there, it'll say, and Alyssa scored at a level 2, and it tries to give enough. Yeah, it doesn't do is say, well, then what would it look like if they were at a level 3? And that's where, and again, it was a huge battle. Do we give the parent a document, or we do give them just enough? Those are the types of conversations we hope the teachers can get into. And let me tell you what a 3 and stuff, but you're right. Those are the types of things we can do with the future ones, what we learn from these. But again, it's that Now, I'm not saying that doesn't happen with teachers and parents, because it did with mine, but it wasn't based off of a test. It was just good. So.
So so to go along with the student report that you're making available to parents, there's also a document called the interpretive guide. It was just updated. So if you haven't looked at it this week, then there's a box on the second page with that's going to explain the difference between what the claims on the back tell you and what the scale score on the front is, okay? So the scale score on the front, that's the whole assessment. On the back, the claims, it tells you that the claims are it's on a different scale. The depiction in the graph is 100 to 120. The state median, so the state is always going to be the same. We have to work on these for next year, I agree. It took us all a little while to really understand what it's sharing. The state median is 110. Is that right? I'm looking at late, yeah. So it's always going to be there, how your district compares, how your school compares, and then how the student compares to the median. So it's really just giving you with the student, the error band is larger, so you're going to see a box and whiskers on there. And it's going to let you know that this year, it says if you read the little red box on there, that was capped at 106. So, yeah, it's just letting you know on the claims how the student is performing compared to the school, the district, and the state. So if they're on the lower side or if they're on a lot of them I've looked at, everything is just the same, straight through. And you go, well, what information is this telling me? Working on trying to provide help with you on how to interpret that. But that's what I don't understand from that report that I'm still trying to get answers. And so if any of you have an insight that you can share is, it's the state median, how that relates. So where are we pushing the state to go so you know how to compare? And we haven't communicated that very well yet. Mm-hmm. No, probably not, because I just, earlier, what we heard the community at large requesting was a decon testing. So we worked very hard to basically have a 60 to 75 item assessment for you across all the standards, and the level of information we can provide back is at the claim level with what you see. Ratios would not be claim. Okay, so we're not going to have, I know, but it's that example, but it's the same with everything. Now on the ELA assessment, they can separate out for you the informational text from the literary text. And at one point, reading subscores, we're not there right now. I can't tell you that, but that could be. That's when we thought we had to report. We may have to, under NCLB, report reading scores along with the ELA or something. We don't have to. The federal government said your ELA score is fine. So, but we can't drill down to that level with this assessment. If you want the summative assessment to drill down to that level, it would have to be longer. And we're not hearing that people want a longer assessment, that you want to use your own measures to make that decision. Yes, and I didn't talk about the adaptive at all today. That can be for another time. Okay.
And I'm hoping that somebody can help me. None of the special codes that we sent up are showing up. All those kids are showing up that we didn't test them, even though we sent special codes.
Okay, and that's one. So I'll address. Okay, so first I'm going to tell you it is fixed. The second thing I'm going to tell you, because I know some of you are very frustrated with some of our communication, but we have a limited number of people that QC the data before we make it available to you to look at. And part of the check process is for you to find things that got left out, and you can tell us so we can fix it. So you're checking your data for yourself. If whoever, and I can't tell you, but I'm sure Lee probably can, tell you the first district that realized the SC codes were missing, and we went in and we looked, oh, that was missing for the whole state. Timeout. We have to fix that. We figured out the problem, reran, did an upload on it, and fixed it. So that's so important that you're checking it for yourself, but if you find a problem and you let us know, the odds are pretty good it could be for the whole state. Timeout. We have to fix that. We figured out the problem, reran, did an upload on it, and fixed it. So that's so important that you're checking it for yourself, but if you find a problem and you let us know, the odds are pretty good it could be the whole state, and we had to fix it for everyone. So it was identified. It's supposed to be fixed today. So okay. So our data runs take when we find a mistake, the data runs take anywhere from 6 to 24 hours because it's a big database that they have to sort through and work through it. Yeah. Yeah. So we should, by Monday when you come in, it should be corrected. But thank whoever identified the problem. Thank you very much.
One or two things. Well, a lot of things. I could dance, but I'm sure you won't choose that one. If we're already 30 minutes, 35 minutes into lunch. If you want, you can grab your boxes and something to eat and sit back down, and we can keep answering questions while you're eating. Or we could talk about this, but I know you're getting hungry. Do you want to take a 10-minute break, and then we do a working with questions? Or do you want us to shut up for 30 minutes so you can enjoy a lunch and dialogue? How many want us to shut up for 30 minutes while you can break and eat and we can get started? Raise your hand. How many want a 10-minute, get your food, and we'll answer some more questions while you're eating, right? At 1:45, we'll answer some more questions until 1 o'clock.
I will entertain for the next few minutes any other questions that you might have that you'd like us to answer. If you can think of anything. If not, we're just fine with letting you eat and enjoy some time visiting with your friends. Questions? Okay, just a couple things that we picked up over the break when we were visiting with people, KSDE staff did. So, like I said before, the Check Your Data serves two purposes. One, for you out in the districts and buildings to make sure kids are all in the right buckets and everyone's counted appropriately for future measurement of growth. But the second thing is, if you're identifying any problems, please send an email either to the MO Help Desk or to Lee or myself or to Kelly and let us know, because rarely are the problems isolated. And I mean, I can't stress this enough. You lived in the old AYP world. You know what happens when we close the window. That's just an IT fact of life that we have to live with. When we close the window, we move to the next year with our data, it's just very, very difficult to go back and make changes. So if you're seeing anything in your Check Your Data that looks questionable to you, give us a call, send us an email, and we'll check it out, because we really want to make sure everything is as accurate as it can possibly be. Same thing with Kite. Yeah, it's the same way with Kite. So I would just like to put in another plug for the pre-conference on the assessment day. We have some very important issues, things that we found out from this last testing year, things with local caching, TEST records, all kinds of mundane things that really isn't probably what you want to know today, that we need to share with the field. And if you can just make sure someone gets to the pre-assessment conference so they can hear what we're sharing about caching or TEST records or scoring MDPTs, just anything you can think of that might be related with the assessments, then really it would be in your district's best interest to try to send someone to that pre-conference session. And we're extremely excited about the afternoon sessions, and if you have content people wanting to know how to link the standards with the assessments and how you can make it all more relevant in your daily instruction, that's the focus of the afternoon sessions. So the afternoon sessions, really, test coordinators would find it beneficial, you would find it beneficial, but your content people, if they're coming, would also find it beneficial. And then the best part of all that is that you'll already be there. You can spend the night in Wichita, have a good time, and you'll be there bright and early and get a good seat for the big reveal on Tuesday morning, which we're extremely excited about. We haven't, just need to put another plug in for that. Anyone think of any other questions? So just want to reiterate, because the questions came up about what level 1, 2, 3, 4 the implications for that. Remember, we told you for federal accountability, the only two AMOs that matter this year are participation and the graduation. And then so there really isn't, you don't have to worry about the accountability for the different levels at this time.
We have 7 minutes now. Someone told me earlier you didn't give us really good options. It was either eat and answer questions or tell us to shut up. And I said, well, most people in here have no problem telling me to shut up. So I didn't think that was a loaded question. But we still have a few minutes left before I introduce the people that are going to visit with you this afternoon. What other questions? Assessment, accreditation, how I'm doing, not interested. Okay, one thing I will kind of give you an update on is a little over a year ago, we created a group called the KPLT. Another acronym, anybody heard of that? Okay, there's a few out here that are on it or engage. One of the challenges we have is messaging. Pretty apparent. We have one math, we got a interim science. We can't be everywhere, but at the same time, I don't think we should. So we tried to rethink that. How could we get the message out broader, quicker? And there's a lot of things that we can do, like the lunchtime hot time. But we created what's called the Kansas Professional Learning Team, KPLT, which is made up of one person from every service center, one person from a school district within the region of the service center. We extended invitations to the largest, or, not every district uses a service center, so we extended to like the largest 15 school districts, So we pulled these people in from across the state, about 25, 30 people, and we meet with them frequently throughout the year to come in, get the latest, create messaging, go back out. So we will be trying to get them out more often, letting you know who they are, when you can contact someone that's on it to find out some answers, or to maybe even have people engaged in some professional development days. So if you've heard the phrase KPLT, that's them. They're okay. This afternoon, there are times when I'm out across, and I was at a chief state school officers meeting, and I saw a tool that I thought, wow. I mean, this could be the answer that if I'm a principal or I'm a superintendent, and as far as professional learning for my teachers, I want it. But I needed to know more about it. So we invited them. They're called Bloom Board. We invited them. They're already in several states. And we wanted to kick the tires and see if it's quality, if there's integrity. Other states are already using it, but it's a huge resource for professional learning for teachers. K-State is piloting it right now in their candidate program. We felt like, okay, as a State Department, we know enough that we need to know, but who could we run it across? In curriculum leaders. So we invited them to share what they have with you, and then I want you to then let us know. You can email Teresa and I and say, yes, this is something we would like to continue to look at as a state. We believe it could fill a huge piece that we're struggling with locally. So I'm going to introduce Jason from Bloom Board. They're going to share with you what it is. And then when it's done, I want you emailing Teresa and I to say, yes, Brad, we have something, a need for this. We're too busy right now, whatever it is, but we're at the point we need people from the field to tell us, hey, this fits, we're busy, whatever it is. So, Jason, floor's yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brad. Thanks, everyone. Let me just set up plug in my laptop here for a minute. Oh, sure. I think this just needs to go right in there. So thank you all for taking the time. I really appreciate it. It's a little bit weird having the dead zone here. It's like, I don't smell it. Yeah, it's a little weird. So the quick background on us, so we've been around for about 5 years. We really started out as a teacher coaching platform, so trying to really understand how you scale high quality instruction. And then we've spent a lot of time, we're in about 22 states, about 700 districts, and we've got about 5 state contracts. And so we work pretty widely, pretty broadly. And a lot of what we spent our time focusing on in the last year or so is really around teacher motivation and trying to think about how do you crack the nut of how to really engage teachers in growth in a really meaningful way. And that if we're going to have the promise of any real progress, we've got to be able to do that. Because we know that teachers are fundamentally the biggest driver of outcomes in the classroom, and that they ultimately matter most in terms of how we think about driving instruction. And if any of the Common Core, any of the technology, any devices, any of the personalized learning, if any of that is ever actually going to come to fruition, it's all going to happen because there's a really empowered teacher in front of the classroom or within the classroom to help facilitate that. And yet at the same time, right now, we know that teachers' lives are really, really, really hard, and there's a whole new set of mandates, a whole new set of fads, a whole new set of things and pressures being put on them that are really struggling. And so you see just a ton of turnover within states and across the country where it's just really hard to maintain teachers. And so districts are trying to hire 20, 30% of their workforce over again year over year. And it's just creating all sorts of real problems. And when you talk to teachers about why, it really comes down to this idea of what's the job look like? Does the role look really meaningful, and can I find a really supportive leader who can really help empower me and help really grow as a professional? And so what we always said is we come back to this idea of, well, now imagine what would the world look like? So as you all think about, this is something you all think about day in and day out, what would the world look like if you really could create a mechanism for your teachers that was truly empowering and really supporting? What would that be? What would that ecosystem, what would that sort of environment be? How would you create those sorts of conditions? And fundamentally, what are the actual drivers that matter most in that environment that really teachers want to engage in most? And this is where we spend a lot of time. Motivation and all of the incentives within how teachers engage in growth is something that's super, super key to really trying to drive meaningful change in practice. And so it's something we spend a lot of time obsessing about. And one of my favorite resources for it is this book. How many people have read? So about a quarter of you. So you should all go buy this book. I don't know Daniel, but this is an amazing book, and the whole tenets of it are around thinking about the way people perform, and when people perform at their highest, when do people actually perform in really high quality ways? What are they doing, and what are the conditions that make them? Is it because you can pay them more money? Turns out that's not true, right? What really matters most to people is that they're creating a condition for autonomy. And if you give people autonomy in their craft, in their work, it becomes a really empowering, it becomes a really supportive environment because they feel like they own their own destiny. And so what does that look like in terms of that future world? The second is mastery. Every human beings by nature want to feel like they're actually growing, want to feel like they're evolving, want to feel like they're getting better, and that they're really creating all sorts of ways to master whatever skill they're working on. So you see this in gamification, you see this in all sorts of things around what does mastery look like, and how do we talk about mastery with teachers about that in their craft. And then finally, what's the purpose? And this is obviously in the education world, this is one of the easier ones to get, which in most other worlds is actually much harder to get. But really, how do you think about aligning the work that teachers are doing with a sense of purpose, with a sense of actual changing in the lives of their kids? What does that look like? So what I thought I'd do is actually just give you a little sense of how we think about each of these drivers in the sense of teacher training and in the sense of the kind of products and the things that we're working on. You can't quite see the image here. This is about a 3-year-old girl. My daughter just learned to tie her shoes, and so now it takes us an extra 20 minutes to leave the house because she has to tie her shoes, but she is super happy that she can tie her shoes. and my 3-year-old son wants to tie his shoes too, which is not going to happen in the near term. But it's really, again, it speaks to that human nature around how do you think about engaging and being autonomous in the things that you're learning and things that you're doing. One of the things that we find is the best way to do that is to really facilitate personalization and to understand, are you meeting a teacher with the needs that they have? Are you meeting them with support that meet directly those needs? Or is it more of a one-size-fits-all sort of environment? I think we all know the cliche PD, weekend workshop sort of experience where teachers are grading papers or playing Sudoku. And I think the question is, how do we create a mechanism for really personalizing growth and development on that? And then at the same time, how do you focus on problems of practice? It's been interesting over the past, with all of the explosion in digital content and digital resources, there's all sorts of new sites, and that's all, we even play into this, that are really point-by-point resources, right? And so the question is, well, if I'm a teacher and I go to a site that's got a bunch of videos up and running, it takes me a lot of energy to figure out, like, how does that one video solve a problem of practice that I'm having? So how do you think about how this research paper, how does this article, how does this example of student work, how does it help me solve a specific problem of practice? And one of the things that we've learned a bunch when you look at tools like Pinterest is that curation does a lot of really interesting things because it focuses the conversation around the problem of practice and less around the resource. And that shift is really, really powerful. And then finally, how do we leverage the infrastructure in terms of PLCs, in terms of communities, right? Content in any form, whether it's for adults or whether it's for teachers, is never going to change teaching practice. It's just never going to happen. It's all about facilitation of conversations around that content and around that problem practice, and so we have to be able to leverage that sort of work. And so what we've done to do that is really focused on, sorry, let me now switch over here. So what we've really done is try to think about what that curation looks like. And so now as I go to, let me zoom out. And so the quick background, so if you go to our website right now, so this is the website we have. It's really focused on, again, this idea of what's a marketplace for teachers look like. And a lot of what we started to do is we built out a set of observation tools that we use across, again, I said these 5 different state contracts. Some districts use our observation tools, some districts don't. But the idea has always been, what if we could take the data in those observations and use it to build recommendations in a much more personalized way, a la Amazon, right? Amazon makes pretty amazing recommendations for you as a shopper based on a pretty terrible data set about who you are. It's kind of eerie how good they are at it. And so if we could do the same for teachers, it would really help align and empower growth in terms of the things they're working on. So that was the fundamental mission. I think what we realized is, again, going back to this individual resource problem, is that it's really hard to engage teachers around a specific resource because they're struggling with a much broader problem of practice. And so what we said is, well, what if the front door of that experience around growth, what if that's less focused on a specific resource, kind of an e-commerce-y Amazon approach, and what if that's actually just more a Pinterest sort of approach? And so now how would you think about what the collections of practice, what are the collections of resources to help you solve a specific problem of practice? What might those collections be? And how do you then engage teachers around sharing and recommending and commenting on those specific problems of practice, whether it be resilience, whether it be diverse learners? And the nice thing about that is then we can then use that to start to build out collections and trending and categories around those specific problems. And so we can start to really personalize problems of practice for teachers based on the things that other teachers are working on. And so one of the things I asked Lynn before coming here was, what are some of the things that are super relevant in Kansas? What are some of the things that you guys are working on right now that we could be most helpful with, and what would that look like? And so we really built out a couple of specific, we went to our community of teachers. Again, we will not be, there's not any one company that will ever be able to create all the content that's the best content in the world. It's much more about facilitating who does that curation, who does that collection, and then making sure that we as a company have a very, very high bar for what those collections look like before they ever go public. And so we'd rather have 1,000 amazing collections than 100,000 mediocre ones. And so what we did is we said, well, what are the things that are really, that are most specific to Kansas at the moment? How can we then leverage our community to build out collections for those specific practices? And so we had a couple of our folks come back and say, okay, well, if we're looking at, zoom out again. If we're looking at classroom management strategies, it might be, right, the set of resources that's really focusing on, the nuts and bolts of that pedagogy. But then it's letting, again, that facilitation lens really focus on, well, how does this actually relate? How does this resource, maybe it's only one chapter within that book that's actually really relevant, or maybe it's only one part of that video that's actually relevant to that problem of practice. And so it's giving people the ability to really couch that sort of sense in what those things are, and then being able to manage the collections against that. Same thing goes for, right, when you think about 21st century learning and really focusing on critical thinking. There are a lot of really interesting videos, a lot of really interesting resources in the world around critical thinking skills, but right now to go find them, if you just search critical thinking in Google, you'll spend a long, long time trying to actually surface what that looks like in terms of trying to change pedagogy and change practice. And so trying to aggregate that sort of work and work across the different states we're working in to start to build out that set of tools and build out those sets of collections aligned to whatever the resources are. This is where we've spent a bunch of our time recently, and it's been kind of interesting when we do, so in Silicon Valley when you're building technology products, often user research, user experience testing is what they do. So you'll take a teacher, put them at a table, put a laptop in front of them and say, hey, we have this collection, I want you to look at it. And a teacher will say, okay. They'll click through and they'll give you feedback on whether they'd share it, whether they'd recommend it, what they'd do with it. And what we started to do is a week before they were coming in for the interview, we would say, hey, what's something that you're working on right now? What are you trying to do? What's the biggest problem of practice you're working on? And the teacher would say, well, implementing Google Apps. And so I'm trying to get my kids to engage with it. Or I've got 2 new kids with autism, and I've never had anybody have autism spectrum before, so I'm not sure what to do with it. And so they come up with all sorts of these interesting, I'm working on close reading, because it's Common Core aligned, and so we're doing X, Y, and Z. And so what we would do is before they then came in, we would have our community go build the problem, but build the collections around that, make sure that we've vetted it, make sure it's super high quality, and then we'd sit the teacher down, and unbeknownst to them, we would just open the collection that they happen to have as their problem of practice. And it was this aha moment for us where teachers all of a sudden were like, oh, interesting. And they would go through and they would spend 20 minutes, and so we would try to do the interview, and we'd try to kind of figure out, all right, well, how would you share this? And teachers would say, no, stop, okay, I'm gonna go through it. And they would spend 20 minutes just going through all the resources because it bridged the gap into the thing that they're actually struggling with most and gave them a bunch of new ideas about how to tackle that problem of practice. And so I think what we find is the ability to do that sort of curation and partner with districts and partner with states to start to curate the entire community of what those best practices would look like is really, I think, what we get very excited about. Again, in the same way that we know, right, when you think about differentiated classrooms, all of the different things that go along, so differentiation is an incredibly broad topic, but when it thinks about what's the actual problem practice, is it managing your classroom, so it's about grouping, and it's about homework organization, or is it about specific differentiation, whether that's close reading strategies? So it's really trying to divide up what's the right grain size in terms of those problems, and then trying to facilitate conversations at that level, and then again, create support for that, so that teachers can engage in those conversations, and maybe this isn't the right collection for a specific teacher, but maybe there's a version of it that's better for others that then can be built by the community to help, again, surface what's really working. And so that's really how we think about autonomy. The second point, I guess for Star Wars fans, you could see Obi-Wan. When we really think about mastery, it comes down to really trying to understand what are the skills, what are you trying to do when you're mastering your craft? And this is probably the biggest shift we see across the country right now, and it's still very early, and it's still certainly very early in many of the states we're working in, and so this is probably a little bit further out. But the idea of shifting from an inputs model for PD to an outputs model for PD, I think the question comes up often at conferences, well, what's high quality PD? What does it look like? What does it work? And I generally would posit, like, what if that's just the wrong question? What if the right question is actually, well, did a teacher change or improve practice coming out of that PD, right? That PD may be different across a bunch of different learners, as in the same way that students learn very differently. And so what if it's less about the inputs of that PD and more about what the outputs came from that? And so what would that shift look like? And how can you do things like leverage video, which is a super powerful mechanism for engaging in practice and understanding what that shift was? And we do a lot of work around video-based observation, so video-based coaching work. Tom Kane, who did the MET study out of Harvard, who uses us as their video observation platform for really trying to understand what sort of ways you can give teachers feedback in video. And then finally, how do you actually create mechanisms for recognition of that mastery? And this is where we've started to get really into things like micro-credentials. We have an announcement that'll happen next week with Digital Promise. If you've heard of them, they run the League of Innovative Schools, and they came out of the Department of Ed. And it's really, they're trying to focus on what does the future of competency-based PD look like. And so it's still very early, but it's really understanding how do you think about the shift to competency-based PD, what would that look like, and could you create the mechanisms for micro-credentials around that? And so this is still in its infancy, but I figured I would give you at least a very small glimpse into what this might look like down, if you say, a year or two, 3 years away. But the idea is that for any collection we can build, then you can add to it, right, the idea for you to be able to get a certificate against that. And so now you think about, if I'm working on resilience, or if I'm working on critical thinking, what does demonstrating mastery of critical thinking look like in a classroom? What would be the student output that would demonstrate that? What would be the actual video of that teacher's instruction? What would be the lesson plan that would incorporate that? What would that look like? And so what we've done, I started to think about, well, now if I can use that, if I'm a teacher, I can click into that, I can learn what that criteria is for demonstrating mastery. I can see what that means, I can see what those specific skills are, and then I can actually upload a portfolio of evidence against it. And so I can add my video, my lesson plan, my student work, and when I actually want to add that to review, that then gets sent off to a master reviewer, to a regional service center, to someone who can actually then be able to do that review, who's been certified and mastered that skill already. We've even played around with potentially having peer review in the future, so you send that portfolio to 5 teachers that already have credentials on it and get their feedback for it. But the idea is that once that review happens, then there's effectively a queuing mechanism that we use to manage all of the submissions, and then I can then submit that whatever that teacher submitted as their portfolio, I can send that out to a specific reviewer. That reviewer can effectively log in, they can see the criteria, they can see the portfolio and provide feedback on it. And then if that teacher, depending on how that teacher did, they can fill out a scoring guide, a scoring rubric that says, yep, you did a great job, or here's some feedback on what that looks like. And if you passed, and if you get that credential, now we can really think about what's that next pass, what would be that credential look like, and how could that then become a micro-credential, or effectively a badge on that teacher's profile that becomes a living, breathing part of their ongoing practice. So it's thinking about the mastery of the craft as a set of skills that you can ultimately master, and you can continue to evolve and continue to get better. And so how do you think about that sort of environment in the future? And then how do you bridge the gap between this sort of seat time model that we have around CEUs and certification and clock hours to something where you can actually award that same sort of credential, that same sort of certificate, but do that in the context of really demonstrating mastery? Sure. Please. Appreciate it. Yeah, and I think there's just a lot of really interesting potential behind what that sort of micro-credential can do, in the ways that you can really let teachers actually feel empowered and really let them own their own craft. And so we get very excited about it in terms of what that potential looks like. And again, I think it's one of those things where it's clearly going to have to be districts really starting to take ownership over that sort of model and trying to think about how they want to manage and how they want to support teachers. And it does factor into all the sorts of things that we're talking about in terms of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, because you need to align that system and you need to be very thoughtful about what are the implications for the evaluation processes you have in place. What are the implications for the other systems? When we get into the purpose side of it, a lot of, I think, when we've looked at it, the past has been, how do you build an environment of vulnerability that's safe for vulnerability, and how do you create trust? And what we know is that in all the work we've done, so we've had statewide rollouts in the last few years. In all the work we've done, I think we always come back to the question of, we can build a good company. We can build a company that's selling subscriptions of content, right? That's trying to personalize learning. But are we really going to have the sort of impact that we want if you're really trying to drive and everything, the engagements around the content is all happening in the context and very closely tied to when a teacher is doing evaluation? And so one of the things we've started to think about is how could we actually create really private spaces for teachers to engage in their own growth, do that separate from the evaluation, but when they're ready, when they feel comfortable, when they feel like they've been supported by their community, that they're actually in a place where they're confident, then they can share that sort of data back into their evaluation system. And that sort of contrast actually does create the mechanisms for trust that are super critical, because you fundamentally just can't get growth if you don't have vulnerability, if you don't have trust, because you're always going to put up some sort of wall. And even in the most aligned, I think, evaluation systems, where you find they've been incredibly thoughtful around pay scales and things, even where you have the best of intentions, we find teachers that will sandbag their goals all the time. Because when you talk to teachers, we have 40,000 teachers across all of Arkansas, all of their goals, all of their personal learning goals in the system, and you can ask a teacher in Arkansas on a pretty regular basis and say, oh, what are you working on? What's your biggest goal right now? And they'll tell you something, and you can compare it to what their goal in their evaluation system is, and they're two entirely separate things. Because teachers know that that's my evaluation goal, so I'm going to make sure I can hit that one and that feels comfortable, but then I'm going to work on my own and I'm going to do something else, and I'm really going to work on the thing that I'm struggling with most. And so it's about trying to think about how you create those sort of structures and the mechanisms for vulnerability and create that sort of mechanism for trust, because ultimately that's what matters. And this is mastering a craft which is incredibly complicated and incredibly hard. And so teachers need to feel vulnerable in terms of how they're testing and how they're playing and how they're experimenting, because it's the only way they'll actually get better. This is why video is super important. This is why being able to have that sort of autonomy is really important. And then finally, I think one of the big things we look at is how do you think about the mechanisms for really driving what changes practice? So I think as we look at the PD world, it's less about, in the long run, it's obviously all about student outcomes, our students learning better. But from a PD perspective, it's really about more, did a teacher change practice? And if you can say confidently in all the PD, when you're delivering PD across all the different work that you're doing, if you can say that teachers leave that session, leave that practice, leave that interaction with their principal, and that they go back into their classroom and they change practice, that's the number one goal. If they can improve practice coming out of that, the question is just how do we make that happen at scale? And what does that look like to do that in a really coordinated way? So a lot of our obsession with outcomes for kids is focusing on how do you change practice first. And so we have some efficacy study and some work we're doing with Harvard and other folks to really start to think about driving changes and improving practice, because ultimately that's what matters. If you can get teachers to really engage, our tend to belief is if you can engage teachers in thinking about their craft as a portfolio and as a portfolio of demonstrated mastery, that forces teachers into changing practice, because it's about understanding what mastery looks like. How do you demonstrate that? How do you then understand how you access and engage in content relevant to that problem of practice? And then how do you make progress going forward? So in our world, it's really trying to think through what does that specific mechanism need to look like to engage teachers to improve their practice that next day, that next week, when they go back into their classrooms and they really start to think about what that would be. Let me pause there for questions. I don't know if I'm allowed to do Q&A, but it's generally easier across all this. I'm going to use my wait time skills right now. So all this seems super easy, straight right off the bat. So in the places, so we are seeing where we've had the conversations in the places like Arkansas, where we were in probably 95% of the state at this point. It's a lot of the rollout we did with their evaluation system was all focused on growth. And so we have a kind of an interesting past. And so we rolled out with the state of Connecticut early on. It was very last minute. It felt pretty crazy at the time. But that was really focused on just getting the observation tools up And I think we lost a lot of potential opportunity in Connecticut because it felt very punitive, because we didn't have a chance to really focus on the growth side. And so we said, we're never going to make that mistake again. And so when we went into Arkansas, all of the training, all of the support, everything we did said, if you ever have if you ever have a conversation with a teacher about practice and about evaluation, you have to have in that same conversation a conversation about growth and a conversation about support. And that those two things can't exist separately, they always have to be bundled. But again, even in there where I think we've done a great job, we have funny write-ups in the front page of the Little Rock Times about how well the implementation went, which you don't generally get from like HR compliance software. But even as good as that implementation been, I still think we are missing the potential and the opportunity to actually drive meaningful growth in practice, because the conditioning there is, well, a teacher only needs to then engage in practice when they're getting their evaluation. And so if our goal as a company were to just engage teachers 3 times a year on practice, like, do we think we'd actually get there? I don't think so. And so that's where we went back. We hired an individual from our team who's now runs all of our product, so about a year ago. And he was one of the first 100 employees from Amazon, so he built Prime in one click. He was then the head of North American payments for PayPal, and then was the head of all relationship products for LinkedIn. And so he has this amazing background of these really phenomenal products. And he came in, and the first thing when we started talking, he was like, so do you think that the product that we have right now is really going to impact like a real fundamental change in education? And it was one of these like kind of heart-to-heart conversations, and I was like, no. But I think we're working on some stuff that could. And so this is where we started to think about how you really drive and think about, in some ways you want to create the separation between growth and evaluation. You still need to tie them together, because the only way to really grow is to actually understand where you are and then figure out what's going to help you, where do you want to be. So you have to have both sides of it. I think the problem is we started out from the model of you can do those things totally in tandem, and I think that's much, much harder, because people are just suspect. And teachers are just suspect of everything because they've been done to so much in their lives, so much in their careers. And so this idea that there's anything that's going to be really supportive for them, it's like, okay, yeah, but like you're still standing over in the corner with your, with the big stick. And so I don't really feel like it's all that trusting an environment. So I think that was what led to a lot of the way we think about now, what's that next, what would that be? What would that product look like that could really engage teachers in practice? And if you engage teachers in practice, then there's all sorts of really interesting things we can do, but that's been the fundamental, one of the hardest things to crack. No problem. Any other questions? I see. Yeah, so the question was, what was the process that needs to take place to really facilitate this in schools? I think one of the problems that we find, and maybe this is a Silicon Valley kind of technology problem, is the moment things get rolled out into schools that are mandated, and so we actually don't really prefer to do statewide things anymore, because the moment something is mandated, a teacher's immediate response is, oh, I'll wait till training. And the number of tools that teachers use that they've never been trained on is like, there are hundreds of them. And yet, like from the top-down perspective, every tool that they use that's top-down, they wait for training on. And so it's this very interesting disconnect in terms of like, how do you roll things out? What's the best way to get teachers to engage? Our fundamental view is we have to make it, if we can't get teachers to engage on their own without being trained, we have failed miserably from a company standpoint. I think what we have learned is it's really about how you bridge that gap in terms of the personal connection. And so where we then work with districts or pilots, where we work with schools, is to sit down and say, okay, who do you have that has expertise in specific areas? What are those specific teachers? Who are those specific teachers? Can they build and curate these collections around specific practice that's most relevant to the district? And so often these teachers already exist. Often they're using email to do this or using Google Docs to do this anyway. And so then it's working with them to build out what's the collection, what is the set of collections that you would want, right, for your district that would be most meaningful for you. And we may then also come back and say, hey, you know, we have a bit of we have kind of an editorial team on our side. Hey, some of these collections are pretty amazing. Could we make them public? And we'd really like to make sure that everybody can benefit from those, and so are you comfortable with that? But it's really about having that sort of conversation up front, and it's about building out the set of resources, the set of collections that matter most. Because once we have that, then we should be able to really just plug that into whatever coaching systems you have in place, whatever coaching networks you have in place, and say if you're having conversations, we can make it engaging for those teachers, because that's the whole goal, is how do you make it engaging for their practice, and what's that need to look like? But then it doesn't have to be a very heavy top-down kind of approach, because often what we find is then teachers wait, and then they wait to plug it into the system, and we have to make it intrinsically and extrinsically motivating. Obviously, where you can give teachers credit for these sorts of things, that's also why we've started to move down that sort of micro-credentialing path, which is the idea of if I can build out a set of collections, or if I can focus on specific competencies in my school, can I get credit for that? And could I demonstrate, what would that look like to be able to demonstrate mastery? And then I don't have to go to whatever course, whatever other resource. I've already demonstrated mastery, so I got my 6 hours. And that I think is that's the really powerful extrinsic motivator, but I think we're also really focused on the intrinsic side to really make sure we can crack that. Other questions? All the time. That's right. I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at it, it is about leveraging the community. I think we know that there's just a lot of instances where teachers don't have access to other people who are working on the same things, and exactly. And there's not enough structure. We've actually done a ton of research based from leveraging Pearson's research around PLCs and what it takes to drive really good PLC environments. And there's a bunch of really interesting, we may ultimately even start adding in virtual coaching sort of experiences. I mean, you could imagine if you're in a specific collection and you can jump into a hangout with someone who's a master on that specific area, right? Then that's a really interesting, really powerful way to drive, again, even more coaching, but it's super scalable, right? Because that coach, right, the problems of practice are not super specific within states, that they're not something that other states are dealing with or other districts in the state are dealing with. And so it's about really being able to manage and leverage that sort of community of teachers, and where you have folks who are master teachers, can they help support that community across the board? And so I think that's exactly where we see that promise. And it's very interesting, we've been doing virtual coaching for the past 2 years. And so right now, even with this partnership with Harvard and with this partnership with the New Teacher Project, there are instances where a teacher can effectively initiate a coaching conversation, initiate an observation upload a video of their practice, upload the lesson plan, upload the student work. That gets sent to a third-party expert who's across the country, but they log in, they annotate the video, they timestamp it, they rate it, review it, and they fill out a feedback form that says, here's the top 3 things you can do tomorrow to improve your practice. And that's a 24-hour turnaround time. And so it's really interesting and really crazy when you think about that sort of ways to now engage in practice. And again, that can be something that a teacher can do in the privacy of their own world, where, you know, I'm not super, maybe I don't have a great relationship with my principal, so I want to do this so that now when I have my evaluation, then I can have a better conversation. I feel like I'm more supported because I can get there on my own. So there's all sorts of really interesting ways we think about trying to balance that. Other questions? So what's that? Oh, so my contact information, so we'll send something out. My contact information is just also jason@bloomboard. So just jason@bloomboard.com. Happy to chat. And we'll be around for a little bit afterwards as well, if you want to chat for anything. All right.
So what I'd like, if there's enough, we're going to be looking, if there's enough interest, email Teresa or I if you'd like to move forward, even if we had a collection that did, you know, we kicked the tires because we haven't put anybody from the field on the bus. We want to know if there's enough interest that we can start exploring. If there's some districts that say, you know what, we'd like to go further with it, because we'd like to also on our end learn from you from what types of things that teachers are doing that could count for recertification. Because wouldn't that be what you would want to be recertifying their growth? So there's opportunities. Lynn, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm Lynn Bechtel from the Teacher Licensure and Accreditation Team, and Brad has asked us to sort of facilitate this project and the potential pilot for it. So we will be putting something out across listservs. So if you forget to email Brad or Teresa or whatever, we will be sending something out asking for those who are interested to contact us. And basically, we'll set our direction based on the interests that we have. So be thinking, take this back to your districts and be thinking about what the potential uses are within your own individual context, because this is the type of system that can be managed and changed based on what you need it to be. So we don't initially probably will not be doing some of the bells and whistles maybe that we have the capability to do within the system initially, but we certainly see opportunities to move forward with that in the future. So be looking for something to come out across listservs and respond if you would like us to be in touch.
Again, if you get home and abort this weekend, next week you can get on their site and have a conversation. We don't want to move further as a state unless it's the direction that people say, yeah, we would like to learn more, possibly pilot, but be looking for an email. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, I got one more hour. Oh, just kidding. Any final questions, thoughts, direction on anything, hopefully educationally related? Teresa, anything I'm forgetting? Well, I'm not going to say, okay, I will. Hang in there, because it's all for the right reason. The only thing that we've slowed down in the last 2 years was the accreditation model. So it was the one thing that we said we can slow down. We listened to a lot of people around the state that said, you know what, we're so busy, but you know, as I really believe that when the board comes out on October 27th with their new vision, it's going to be the start of us being able to have really good conversations about kids and what's meaningful and not get cornered into very narrowed measures of whether or not a child is successful. And we all know it. If you have kids, all you ever wanted was for your school district to give them the skills they needed to be successful, and you want them to partner with you. I'm not going to unload it on these two gentlemen back here. It's all 100% their responsibility that my kids are successful, and I appreciate that they partner with us. They're learning, they're growing, and that I'm a happy parent. And we all know that we corner ourselves. And again, what you're doing is great. The problem is, at a state level, we're not aligned to what you know is right and how we hold you accountable through accreditation. We are out of balance. It was clear through the tours. Kansans told us we're out of balance at a state level. And you know what's right locally. You'd like to learn better from each other. But you can't do it unless at a state level we get more aligned with it and redefine how we measure success. I want my kids to be successful adults. And by the age 24, you've had them for about 80% of that time. So you are a huge influence on it. And right now, I'm extremely pleased as a parent. You know, and honestly, I was looking at a thing that was tweeted out, and I snapped a picture of it. It was the I don't know how many ways you can use the iceberg analogy, but what's out of the water is the success of a child. You know, what you see them do on a basketball floor, what you see them do on a stage, what you see on a report card. What you don't see under the water was all the grit, the persistence, the determination, all the times that they failed and learned from it. And we get so wrapped around just focusing on what's above the water, and then we get fired up. Oh, geez, my kid failed. I got to go save. No. The most successful kids are the ones that learn from failure. The ones that learn all the things we don't see and we forget about. We almost need to flip that iceberg upside down and focus on all of those things, and then guess what? They will be successful when they leave. So anyway, we have to realign at the State Department. So continue to let us know when we get out of kilter. It was great traveling to all those locations across the state and hearing people and working with the people at K-State to really analyze it, and we will get there. So thank you. Have safe drives home. Anybody else, any comments that are appropriate? Safe drive. We'll keep in touch.